Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the regular afternoon council meeting of February the 28th. I will call this meeting to order in just a sec. I have to get it on my surface here. There we go.
Do you want mine until yours loads?
Sure, that would be great. It's taking its time. Thank you very much. Okay, this meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. YouTube.com, District of Summerland. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Members of the public may access the meeting or participate in the following ways. You can attend council chambers in person. Individuals who wish to attend council chambers in person may do so by registering in advance of the meeting by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca to ensure there is enough space in council chambers. You can watch the meeting live or recorded on the youtube.com District of Summerland channel. You can register in advance to speak during the meeting. So this would be under the public comment opportunities of items 6 and 9. You're asked to register in advance, again, by contacting the corporate officer at corporateofficer@summerland.ca with your name, civic address, and how you will be participating, whether in person, over the telephone, or by Zoom. Further details will be provided upon registration. You can also request to speak during the meeting. If you haven't registered in advance but wish to speak during the public comment opportunities, time will be you will have the opportunity, time permitting. After I have provided everyone who has pre-registered with an opportunity to comment, the floor will be open to those in council chambers and those on the conference line. Conference line can be accessed by dialing 778-907-2071 and entering meeting ID 506-489-9374 and passcode 186. I will now ask for adoption. I'll ask if there are any late items to introduce. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there has been a request from Summerland Minor Hockey delegation to go first due to a work conflict. Should council wish, the agenda could be amended by switching items 5.1 and 5.2 to accommodate this request.
Sorry, could you tell me again where it would be in the agenda?
Thanks. So Summerland Minor Hockey, the delegation,
Yes.
Due to a work conflict, has requested to go first.
Oh, I see, and move the other two down. Okay, thank you. So approval of the amended agenda, Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Barkle, thank you. All in favor? Okay. And adoption of minutes. So the regular afternoon council meeting minutes of Monday, February the 14th. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Traynor, thank you. All in favor? And the committee of the whole for the same date, February the 14th, Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Barkwell, all in favor? Thank you. So moving on to delegations, and we'll hear,
Sorry, Madam Mayor, if I can just excuse me, I just had a text from Councillor Patton. He's stuck in traffic, and he sends his He's sorry and he'll be here in about 15 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
you very
you.
much. So we will look at our first delegation. So that's the new one on our agenda, the Summerland Hockey. And I'm sorry, I'm not sure who is presenting.
Hi, my name is Shona Becker. Can you hear
Shona
me
Becker.
okay?
Good, thank you. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Now I do have a PowerPoint to project, if that's okay. I believe you got a hard copy of it as I work through my presentation. Is that okay?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. So in front of you, I'm hoping that you can see my PowerPoint. And as some of you might know, we actually are hosting the Tier 4 BC Provincials coming up in March 20th to 24th here at the Summerland Arena. We're really excited to host 5 other teams from around the province. This is our group of wonderful young men who are representing our community on and off the ice this year as our U18s. So our provincials is coming up. We're going to have 120 players and their families all coming to Summerland and South Okanagan, visiting our community. And we are looking forward to really hosting a really fun and safe event for them. We've had some challenges in our organization and our budget, which is why I'm presenting to council today. So thank you so much for allowing me to present to you guys. As you know, the public health orders recently changed that allowed us to host a tournament, and it was fairly recent. So because things changed so quickly in the land of COVID, we're just kind of getting everything up and going. So we are struggling with some of the things that we might have done prior in December and January, because we just got the okay to host a tournament. Being the provincials, we're kind of trying to get everything organized. As with most things, COVID protocols have really changed how we have to run community events. And it changes the use of our space, and it changes the use of how our teams can access different things within the arena. We want a safe, healthy provincials. And so we are needing to figure out how to physically distance people. And that's created some challenges for rooms, because normally we'll use different parts of the arena that we no longer are able to have access to because we won't be able to physically distance referees and coaches and teams like we have in the past. In addition, we have not had a vendor within the concession. And so we're trying to figure out how we can still maybe provide coffee and tea and stuff, and then rent that vendor space and have it run by parents. Again, trying to create a community fun atmosphere for the tournament. In addition, because there's no food vendors, we're having to rent some parking spaces outside, and we've invited food trucks, which will be lots of fun and encourage that safe outdoor eating. Again, a bit of a challenge with COVID. And also because it has been such a challenging couple of years, our community sponsorship often provides us with a lot of money to pay for some of these things that we would normally do. And we just are not having that same influx of community sponsorships and funds that we have seen in past years. So we've had some solutions to some of these challenges, and we are going to rent the concession. We're going to run it as a group of parents. We're going to look for parking spot places. We're going to use the dry floor so that we can very safely and physically distance, spread out referees and coaches. And instead of having the meeting downstairs in the lobby of the arena, we're going to use the banquet hall so we can spread out all the teams for their welcome for the coaches and managers. But all of these solutions do come with a price tag and a rental fee. So what we're asking today for council is if they would consider an in-kind donation to Summerland Minor Hockey so that we can host a COVID happy, physically distanced provincials. And so what that looks like is that we're looking to use the curling rink dry floor, not upstairs, but just the dry floor. The cost of that was about $1,000 for that May 20th to 24th. We're looking at the banquet hall rental just for one coaches and managers welcome meeting. And then we're also looking for the use of the concession. Again, all of these do come with price tags that have had some challenges. And so we're looking ideally for an in-kind donation of these rental spaces. And that's my presentation. Are there any questions from council?
Thank you, Shona. Yes, we have a question from Councillor Van Elfen to start us off.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If a question through to Shona, if I may, outside parking for a food truck, do you know what the rental cost is of the parking stall? Sorry, you're on mute, Shona.
Shona, could you start again and take yourself off mute? Oh, sorry, I think that maybe you, is she there?
That
There
must
we go.
happen
Thank
several
you.
times a meeting. I'm so sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So it's not a rental price for the parking space, but in order to have the food truck within the arena parking lot, we've been told the price for that will be that 86 or whatever that fee price is. That being said, we have worked it out with the rental trucks to help pay that price. But there is a fee in order to have a food truck in the parking lot at the arena.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Council? Okay. I'm assuming, oh, go ahead, Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick question, Shona, if I could. You said 5 teams from throughout BC. Can you indicate what communities some of these teams might be coming from?
Yeah,
Thank
you
you.
bet. So we have a team from Chetwynd. We have a team from Smithers, from Creston, from Prince George, and South Okanagan, Oliver, Soyuz.
Thank you.
Great, lots of northern representation. It's good. Any other questions, Council? Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just looking through our agenda, and I have some more questions that are really for staff and such concerning this request. Is it on the agenda somewhere that I just don't see it, or is it in the evening agenda? Or
No, there isn't a request for decision on this. But when we get to that, we'll have to, at the very least, receive this for information, and I'll be looking to Kendra for guidance on that at that point. Did you want to, do you have any questions for Shona while we have her on the line?
No, not for Shona, but they would be for, staff.
Okay, so because there is a time restriction, I guess, for Shona, maybe we'll ask those questions of her while she's here. Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Shona. So just to clarify, you're asking for in-kind basically waiving of the curling rink, banquet hall, and concession fees, which will all be used for the purpose of the tournament, but you're not asking for the waiving of the parking lot space fee. Is that correct?
No, that's correct. That was just kind of part of that additional cost situation. And I think that we have a different solution for that. So what we're asking council for is to look at maybe some of those meeting room spaces, such as those 3.
So just follow up. So those will all be, so all your requests are for the tournament itself. It's not for like a vendor or anything like that.
It is for the tournament itself and the meeting spaces for that. You bet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to There seems to be some discussion over there. Well, at the very least, we need to receive this for information. So let's start with that. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Holmes, thank you. All in favor? Great.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So council could add it as a new business item on this agenda.
On the afternoon agenda?
Yeah, then we could add it as item 7.7.
Okay, council, introduction of another new item. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Barkwell, all in favor? Great. Okay, thank you for your presentation, Shona. And we'll be discussing this, as you heard, a little bit later in this afternoon's meeting.
Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. So next we will go to Mr. Andy Schwab, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of council for allowing another group to come ahead of you in the delegation list. I appreciate your patience with that.
Thank you very much. Here we go. Thank you very much. That's much better. With the mask, it's sometimes very difficult. Appreciate all of your time. Thank you very much, councillors and Madam Mayor, for being here today. I recall being in this chamber back in 2015 or 2017 with the very same project. So just to let you know, I just don't quit so easily. It has taken me a while to get here again, but I'm very pleased to be here. So with no further issues, I'm going to just breeze through I have about 20 slides in this presentation, and then I'll kind of open up the floor to questions, and if you can have that. So this is me back in 1997. Can't see the wrinkles for the mask, and the hair's changed color, but in black and white, it looks pretty much the same. My dad was in the boat business. I've been in the ski business. I've been on the water, on the ski hills all my life. And I have a passion for being on the water every day. The issue is how to make a living and be there at the same time. So I eventually got started with the Pentona, which used to be a breakwater at the Pentona Marina up in Peachland. And then I also ran a rescue service on the lake for a number of years. So I try and find a way to get on the lake as often as I can. And there are tour boat operations all around the world. Some of you, I'm sure, have been on some at some point in time. And what I'm trying to do here on the Okanagan is not any different than in any one of those other situations. It amazes me how in Disneyland, they get hundreds of people on that boat, and it goes about 15 feet from shore and back again, and they all go for that ride. So people love to be on the water. This is a poster that I found in the Penticton Museum back in the late 90s, and it is the Okanagan Lake Boat Company. And you can see what I'm trying to do today was done in 1912. And that is a picture. And if you look at the hillside behind that boat, you look at the hillside on the mountain in the photograph, you'll see that that boat was probably going from Sunoka across to Naramata at some particular point in time. And so today, the Fintry Queen is titled to the Okanagan Lake Boat Company. And there is a picture of the ship as it was in 1948. It was originally a car ferry that went from the west side to Kelowna. And many of the items that are on there in the center section there with the ladder and the little windows and the wheelhouse, all of that is still on the ship today. And that's what it originally used to do. Used to go from the west side over to downtown Kelowna. And that is the wheelhouse that is in the ship today. The same wheel. There are only 2 levers that make the thing go. There's nothing electronic on that ship. It's very much as it was. And there's a picture of when Arthur Bailey first converted it to carry passengers up to Fintry. And they used to go up to Fintry once a week. And he put the paddle wheel on it to make it look like a paddle wheeler. It is driven by 2 diesel engines, so I'll show you that in a minute. In 2006 and 2008, they spent an estimated $800,000 on the mechanicals of this ship. So every wire, every light switch, anything on there that's mechanical is effectively brand new, and the ship is in excellent condition today. And there's a picture of the 2 drive engines. There are 2 drive engines that drive it, and 2 other engines that power the electricity. Each one of those engines is running about 1,400 RPM, big old diesel engines, and they consume about 5 liters of fuel an hour. So we have 3 engines running, that's 15 liters of fuel an hour. That's about the same as a Ford F-150 pickup truck, getting 15 liters per 100 kilometers. So very economical to run. And there's a map of what the ships used to do in the old times, run the whole length of the lake. And ideally, that's what I would like to do eventually, is be able to go up and down the entire length of the lake. And there's a picture of it on the bottom left side of it down in Penticton many years ago. And there's a shot of it in front of Peachland back in the 90s, because it used to go up and down the lake and service the different communities. There's a brochure that I had back in 1999 and 2000. I ran the ship for 2 years on a 5-year lease purchase deal. And then in my 3rd year, Transport Canada said they wanted it lifted out of the lake to inspect it. And I said, well, there's no facilities to do that. So my lease ended. And then I got back involved in 2012 when the city of Kelowna was going to scrap it. And I said, oh, this is too good a thing to do. And it's like getting your old car back. You fall back in love with it. And away I've been involved with it ever since. So back in 1999 and 2000, we carried 27,000 passengers in our first year and almost 32,000 passengers in our second year, doing basically 2 to 3 cruises a day. And with that being the brochure and the rack card and the motels. And that was the only advertising that we did back then to get that kind of turnout. There is the objective or goals that I have now. I've basically done 2 business plans and 2 pro formas, one of which I've handed out today for the South Okanagan routes. And I always felt that no matter where it worked on the lake, it would be successful. And to me, the Penticton, Naramata, Summerland triangle is an ideal location for it. And it could, say, depart from downtown Penticton, go across to Naramata, up to Summerland, back to Naramata, back to Penticton, and do that loop about every 2 hours. And it could do that 2 or 3 times a day. So the objective is to sell a ticket for about $25. And you could get on at any one of these points, go across the lake, get off, get on a shuttle bus, go up and visit a winery, come back to the ship. Your $25 ticket is good for the entire day. Go across to the other side of the lake, get off again, come back later in the evening, get the return trip home. So, and there are the 3 dock locations that I've sort of identified as being the most optimum. One being the north side of the Community Heritage Pier. And I've sat down there in the summertime and watched the kids swimming, watch how they jump off the end of that pier, how they swim towards the beach and the other areas, but no one really utilizes that north side of the pier. And the thought is that we wouldn't actually change that pier. What we would do is locate a floating platform where you could, from the pier, walk down a ramp onto the floating platform. The ship would then come in adjacent to the platform. So we're not really changing the pier at all. We're not going to make any major significant changes to it at all. And in the event that something should happen where the ship, for some reason, disappears, the floating platform could be removed, the pilings that secure it should be removed, and in a matter of 2 or 3 days, everything would be back to normal, and you wouldn't see anything. So I'm meeting in the next few weeks with, actually later on this evening, I have a presentation to the Naramata Parks and Rec Committee. I'm also sending letters to City Council in Penticton, so I'm sort of making the political rounds at this point in time. We're not doing any advertising. We don't have any social media program. My concern is initially to get the business funded. And then once we have funding in place, then we can move more progressively forward. This is a schedule. I've given you all a copy of this plan, which is what we have submitted for the Western Diversification Tourism Relief Fund. It's a $500,000 loan application. Funding has been an issue since, I guess, day one. And part of the reason I think is this is pretty much a land-based economy that we are, where everyone who does any type of investing in the Okanagan has real estate as their backup. And when you have no fixed address and no real estate value attached to your investment, it's been very hard to get that investment. There's no, on the coast there's a marine culture, there's a marine industry, but there's no similar marine industry in the Okanagan. This is sort of a one of a kind in Western Canada in many ways. I'll keep going. So this is actually the spreadsheets for the year 3. And in there, I've estimated somewhere coming into Summerland, well, in total number of passengers we'll be carrying is somewhere close to 40,000 passengers. And if you look at the schedules and how they're divided, every single day of the week has a projection, every cruise has a projection, and the numbers themselves are not that significant, but when you add up the total volume over the course of the entire summer, then you get those significant numbers. This is a plan I think I had envisioned about, I think I had a pointer here I was going to use today, but it doesn't work on the TV. But I believe I had estimated somewhere around 13,000 passengers as departing from Summerland over the course of the season. And when I addressed council in years previous, the question always, the most significant question was parking. Where are these cars going to park? There's never any parking down on the waterfront, particularly on a sunny afternoon and the weekends. So my thought was initially to address that we would look to have some sort of a shuttle service operating from town, and perhaps in discussion with the city, we could look at the school parking lots and the arena parking lots and run shuttle services from there. So I haven't got a definitive plan yet on how to address the parking, but I do believe it is something that can be worked on and worked through. Not everyone is arriving on the same day, and in most cases, I did a parking projection based on our numbers, and we were talking 20, 30 cars perhaps on any one given day at any one particular point in time. This is what we're looking at. So for landings and facilities, we had budgeted approximately $60,000, $60,000 to $70,000 for what we needed to do in Summerland. And that would be essentially bringing in that floating landing zone and drawing the pilings and just making modifications to the handrail on the community heritage pier. And that was a picture of the ship when it was in downtown Kelowna. And it operated from that location for almost 50 years. And as you can see, we were adjacent to a public beach and also adjacent to a marina. And in all of that time period, there was never once an incident with the vessel and the public and the boating areas. So it has been in that type of environment before without any incident or issues. It moves very slowly, it comes in very slowly. There's usually adequate time for warnings for people in the area. And people tend to stay away from that particular area as it is. So, sustainability and economic opportunity. There's $300,000 to $400,000 going into public docks and infrastructure. From that $500,000 of that loan, a significant portion of it is going into public facilities. There'll be 30 to 40 jobs being created. There's $500,000 a year going out in wages. And there's another $500,000 in supplies and goods and services that we'll be buying from within the community. And as I said before, in terms of relative risk, the ship has operated in this lake and been here since 1948, but as a tour boat for the last 50 years without incident. And anything that we do in terms of the water can be simply removed and all evidence of the ship is gone. And in this case, we're not going to actually arrive until everything is in place. So at the present time, we started a 3-year program last year, and we spent all last summer working on the ship. I had 2 guys working down on the bilge for 2.5 months. Took 2.5 months to clean the bilge of that boat out after 75 years, but now it looks brand new. And the intent is to continue to work with Transport Canada over the course of this summer to have the ship recertified. And then by September, we should be able to bring it around the lake. And we were planning to do a lake tour and stop at all the historical locations and all the locations where we potentially thought we could get in and land. And we'll be looking to do a 10-day trial operating period in September, and we will bring the ship down to Summerland at that point in time. And those are photos taken a year ago, but it looks pretty much exactly the same today as it did a year ago. And that was the letter that came through the courtesy of the council back in, I'll show the date on that, 2015 or 17. And what I'm looking for today from council is a letter of support for the loan application, either be an expression of interest or a letter of support that will help us secure the loan. Without the loan, nothing is really going to happen. And so it's key to get those, secure those funds first before anything else happens. And there's a picture of the ship where it sits up today at the far north end of the lake. It's been sitting there now for the last 3 or 4 years. And there's one other old tugboat up there also as well, keeping it company. So that's my presentation. I guess that's over. Sorry, I'm a little, not usually quite so nervous. So my apologies for that. I sometimes get a little too passionate about all of these things. I've just been at it so long, I guess, I don't know. But for me, it's all about giving things to other people. And that's why I like being out on that lake so much. And I have so many people that come to me and on a daily, weekly basis that say, oh, I remember my high school grad, or I remember, a wedding or a conference or something along those lines. I'm doing some work on a 96-year-old woman's house in East Kelowna at the moment, building her a stone fireplace. And she said, oh, I recognize you. I've seen you before. And I said, well, maybe this. And she says, oh, yes, my family, I used to take my family all the time. Every time they came to town, we always went out there. And then the following day, she came back to me and said, you know my neighbor, Charlie? He said, his daughter-in-law got married on that ship. And so there it goes. There are so many people that have good memories of it. And when you're out on the lake, it gives you, it sets a moment in time for everyone that goes out there. It's not really the ship itself that people really are concerned about or care about. And it's really not a beautiful thing in a sense, but it's when you're out there and when you look around and you see where you are and your surroundings, and that's what makes it for people. And that's what gives me my thing. So there you go. I won't talk so much anymore. So
Thank you, Mr. Schwab. You never need to apologize for being passionate about something. That's a good thing. Okay, council, questions of Mr. Schwab. Councillor Holmes.
Yes, thank you. And I do remember when you came to us in 2016, I think, and it is an exciting project, and I think it'd be great to have. Since you appeared to us last time, I believe we've done an assessment on that pier, and you might be aware, and it's not in very good shape. And I think the price we were given at the time was something like $1 million to make it safe. And since then, we've had use at your own risk signs put up, and there's a definite need to either replace or repair or remove even that pier. And since then, we've started a waterfront concept plan that'll look at not only the pier, but also things like parking issues and the whole waterfront concept. So I'm not sure if you're aware of all that's happening, but you probably
No, I wasn't actually.
Probably you want to talk to Lori.
Okay, I will.
And so then my other question is, if it's determined that the pier isn't available or can't take 3,000 people a year walking on it, is there any alternative for docking in Summerland you have?
I'd say yes. There's all kinds of alternatives. To me just seemed to be the least barrier to entry, if you want to call it that. But though I would say the options are unlimited in terms of what we could potentially do, because the way it's built, you can get close to shore. And last time we went close to shore was at the old ferry terminal in West Kelowna, and we drove it right up to the beach, and I put a ladder down on the sand, and I didn't even get my feet wet getting on. So there are all kinds of options. The plan that I have prepared for the Western Diversification Fund, basically Summerland is in year 3 in terms of our development, which would be 2024. So we still have adequate time to come up with solutions for it. We're not something that's not obviously going to be immediate this summer, and it could also be not in 2023 as well. It could be 2024 before it actually comes into Summerland. So, and in that interim, I think if we bring it in here in the fall, we can certainly look at options, what we can do and where it could go and how it might fit. So if we had to build a more extensive dock facility and work with the district to accomplish that goal, I would say it's very doable. Does that help?
Okay. I just want to throw out, oh, can't even hear me probably. I just wanted to throw out, in addition to what Councillor Holmes brought to your attention, is that there is some question that's being determined on the ownership of that particular dock as well. So that's another question that's a little bit up in the air. But as you said, this is 2 years
a year
away.
or so away, yes.
Yeah,
So I'm feeling there's adequate time to plan and to make adjustments and to come up with potential solutions for it. I mean, we also had looked at the facility adjacent to the yacht club, where there's those rock berms that are out in the water. We had considered doing something in that area too. And I believe there was a gentleman that was going to at one time develop the old fish hatchery. And I don't know where he is with his project and where that has gone, but there was also potentially an option in there too.
Okay, other questions, Council? Councillor Carlson.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering, is there a risk that Transport Canada won't certify the boat and that you won't be able to actually get back on the water?
I don't think so, not at this time. We've sort of been already down the road with them for over a year now. I have a consultant who worked for Transport Canada for 25 years, ran the Prince George office. He's working with us. We did part of the reason we spent 2.5 months cleaning the bilge this summer, so that we could do a comprehensive hull test, which is almost like ultrasound, where they go into this hull and they look for any places where there's divots or deviations, and they test the thickness of the steel, and the thing passed with flying colors. So we have submitted already an application with that gentleman's assistance in Vernon to do an in-water inspection, and which is typically what they do in areas where there are no facilities to dry dock. And we're expecting an answer back fairly soon. And that has typically been you make an application, it takes a month or 2 to process, and then we'll do the requirements over the course of the summertime to meet that. So as I mentioned earlier, most of the operating systems on the ship were brand new, like all the wires, all the light switches, anything mechanical on that ship was almost only had 100 or 200 hours on it at this particular point in time. And the engines, you can fire them right up. If you wanted, without permission, I could be here tomorrow. So there's fuel on it, it's ready to go. And I was out there 2 weeks ago and pushed the buttons and fired them up. So mechanically, it needs a paint job, but mechanically it's in great condition.
Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You mentioned the parking issue, which I think is a big one, and you said a possible solution would be to ferry people from a location uptown. But it still seems to me that everybody's going to come down and park at the water. and plug up the
It is.
parking at the beach regardless. You know, it's going to be hard to say, if you're going on a boat ride, you cannot park here because nobody will know who's doing what. And you know,
My perception is that a significant amount of the business will probably be en route from one place to another place. If there will be a bus in Naramata that will drop them off, the bus group will come across the lake, and then the bus will come down and pick them up on this side and take them away. Or there'll be wine tour operators or other people that will drop their loads and pick them up again. For sure, there is going to be some parking, but I would think if we promote the facilities and the parking that we have in uptown versus downtown, and utilize the services of those land-based operators to help us move these people. If we need to get a little shuttle bus, that's what we'll do. But I appreciate there is limited parking in the lower town, no question about it. So it is a concern to me too. But from the projections I have, I think most of the people are going to be arriving into Summerland versus departing from Summerland.
Councillor Holmes, I'll go to you. I just have a couple of questions, and then I'll get back to you.
Good.
I'm assuming that the answer to this question is no, and that is there any dredging that will be required for you to dock at the pier in Summerland? I mean,
As far as I know, no.
Okay.
Right, I have sounded it all, and so far, the areas that I've identified are the areas where there's adequate water for us. So, and if there's another area that you might want to put into consideration, then it only draws about this much water, but draws about 6 feet, and that's it. So.
Oh, okay, thank you. And the other question I had, you were talking again about the Transportation Canada inspection.
Right.
Have they changed their requirement to have a dry dock inspection?
Yes. Well, that's the application that we're making. And when I ran it in 99 and 2000, then I didn't realize at the time that there was an appeal process. At that point, I'd spent all my money fixing up someone else's boat and didn't have anything left. And there was a new inspector that was put into the Vancouver office, and there was lots of politics. And I didn't realize that one could appeal to the Coast Guard in Ottawa to get variances on these permit applications, and that's what we've done now. And that's also what was done in 2006, the last operator who had it before me.
Great, thank you. Councillor Holmes.
Yes, thank you. So the motion that we passed back in 2016, would that be sufficient? If we passed the same motion again, would that be sufficient for you?
Definitely.
Okay, thank you. And secondly, if I may, you know, I really think if you're thinking about starting by 2024, that I think you really need to look at an alternative to that pier, because I really can't see us having that sorted out in 2 years' time. Maybe we will, maybe not, but I don't think it's something you can necessarily rely on. And I don't know if Shaughnessy's Cove, if he's talked to them and their pier, if that's big enough to be able to use that.
It's fairly shallow right at Shaughnessy's Cove, right? So probably not a good location, but it's something that I could certainly work with the district on, and trying to identify a location that would be acceptable, right? So I'm not fixed in that one location. I just think it's hugely advantageous to the travelers and to residents to be able to access from Summerland across to Naramata and to Okanagan Mountain Park and other places, and that it would be just a huge boon for tourism in the region.
Okay, so we'll need a motion to receive this presentation for information. Councillor Van Elfen, Councillor Patton, thank you. All in favor? Great. And then again, I'm going to Kendra. Do we also need a motion to provide a letter of support? Yes, in support of his application. I shouldn't speak as if you're not here. Mr. Schwab's application.
Thank you.
If you could provide us with some recommended wording for that.
I believe I can go back to the old one if you'd like. It's Western Diversification Tourism Relief Fund. And should any of you wish to have this information in Excel so that you don't need 3.0 glasses to read it, I'd be pleased to send it to you individually. And if you have comments relative to it, I would certainly appreciate the feedback as well.
So the resolution wording could be that council provide a letter of support for the Okanagan Lake Boat Company. Okay, hold on. Sorry, just give me a second. The council provide a letter of support for the Okanagan Lake Boat Company's application to the BC Western Diversification Tourism Relief Fund.
Okay. Someone would like to bring this to the floor? Councillor Barkwell, seconder. Councillor Holmes. And further discussion on this. Councillor Holmes.
I'm just wondering if we need to add something that we see that, as in previously, a business plan being presented to the district and reviewed by staff before we proceed with down the road with it. In our motion in 2016, we had the motion of support and then added that a comprehensive business plan be presented to the district by the company prior to further consideration by staff. And this question for the CAO, but do we feel we need something like that, before in the motion? I just think, there's still a lot of unanswered questions. There's a lot of things we don't know that we could, so we don't necessarily want to commit ourselves to unless we have answers to those questions, like where is it going to dock, for example?
The letter of support is just so that it's a letter of support for his application for funding. I'm going to go to the CAO just to talk to your concerns, Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Mayor Booth. Yeah, and through to Councillor Holmes, I think we could add that additional portion that what the delegation's provided today, this is a long ways towards a business plan. Would there be some more detail we'd be interested in?
That's right.
And so it might be that a comprehensive business plan be presented to the district by the company for further consideration by staff. I think it wouldn't need to necessarily be prior to further consideration because I think discussion can ensue. But yeah, we could certainly have that for that additional information to come forward.
Kendra, could you read the amended resolution then?
So we have a resolution on the floor, and then did we want to add a resolution to amend that resolution? Because Councillor...
Is that what you're looking for, Councillor Holmes?
Yes, please.
So the main motion is that council provide a letter of support for the Okanagan Boat Company's application to the BC Western Diversification Tourism Relief Fund. And then the motion to amend would be that the main motion be amended to include and that a comprehensive business plan must be presented to the district by the company for further consideration by staff.
That's fine. That's it.
Okay. Seconder for the amendment that's been added to the original. And we'll vote on that. Councillor Van Elfen. Okay, further discussion on the amendment that's on the floor? Okay, so we're voting on, Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't see the benefit of the additional on the motion. Truth of the matter is, when Mr. Schwab comes forward and looks at where the docking, where he's going to be entering into, and I would assume it would be a memorandum of understanding on where he's going to be docking the boat, it's at that time that we could ask for a comprehensive plan. I think at this juncture, all he's looking for is support from the district to allow him to go through on his application for his funding. So I think that at this point, I don't think there's a benefit of adding that in, because at this point, there's nothing Mr. Schwab can do until at some time we decide when Summerland is going to be included, where the boat runs. So anyways, that's my little bit of it. Thank you.
Anyone else? I'm in agreement with Councillor Patton on this one, which is why I mentioned that we're just looking at the letter of support for the application. But I will go to Councillor Barkwell now.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sort of in agreement with Councillor Patton and yourselves. I mean, I don't necessarily see the point in that resolution, but I don't see the harm in it either. I don't see it as being a qualification to our support. We still will send a letter of support. My understanding, I see the CAO nodding his head, so he gets what he requires in order to, and there's just so many million things to be worked out still, that it'll be a business plan, and then there'll be a revised business plan, and then there'll be a business plan version 3 and such. But anyhow, no harm in just saying we'd like to see one at some point, so I can go along with the resolution.
Graham.
Thank you, Mayor Boot. And that's further to Councillor Barkwill's point. That's why I suggested to change the wording to say for further consideration by staff instead of prior to further consideration by staff, because I think what's needed now is a letter of support, but we do know more clarity will be required in the eventual business plan, and that can come when it's ready for consideration by staff.
Okay, and I just wanted to clarify, Graham, unlike the last resolution in 2016, we're looking for another business plan that will be presented to staff, not necessarily council, because, I mean, it's not really up to council to decide. Yes?
Yeah, I think that, thank you, Madam Mayor. It would start with staff, and then we would certainly bring elements for decision-making as required to council. For example, I'd been briefing through some of the materials, and I think one of the questions was maybe sewer provision at the docking site for the management of some of those materials of the boat, and what would be required on the part of the district and who pays for that. And so some of these questions can be detailed out in a more comprehensive business plan. But if particular decisions or investment were to be made, we would definitely be coming back to council at that time.
Okay. Any other discussion on the amended resolution? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, so that carries. And now the question on I'll call the question on the resolution as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Carlson is opposed. So that carries as well.
Wonderful.
Okay, thank you, Mr.
very,
Schwab.
very much. Thank you very, very
Great.
much. I look forward to coming to Summerland. See you in the fall. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just one other thing. You don't have to wait until the fall to get in contact with with the Director of Community Services here.
Yes,
She
we'll
takes care of
take
recreation
that
and
dialogue right
all of
away.
that.
Thank
Right.
you very much. And
Okay,
I do
thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, thanks for your time. First opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone here? Kendra? Nope. All right. So we'll go on to our first business item. And we're 25 minutes behind, so I'm going to try and speed this up a little bit. And that is 7.1 is RDOS Noxious Weed Control Service Establishment Amendment Bylaw number 206502. And 2021 and nuisance, oh, sorry, I can't even read this. 206502 2021 and nuisance control service establishment amendment bylaw number 2019.02.2021. They obviously number their bylaws differently than we do. Okay.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor. Good thing I talk fast. So the RDOS has requested council consideration in accordance with the Local Government Act to consent on behalf of the electors of the District of Summerland to the adoption of the RDOS Noxious Weed Control Service Establishment Amendment Bylaw number 2065.02/2021 and Nuisance Control Service Establishment Amendment Bylaw number 2198.02/2021. The purpose of these bylaws is to increase the requisition limits for the RDOS Noxious Weed Control Service and the Nuisance Control Service to maintain current service levels. If the Noxious Weed Control Service Establishment Amendment Bylaw is adopted, the District of Summerland portion of the requisition limit for the service would increase from $8,230 to $9,304, and a home assessed at $700,000 would see an annual increase of 16 cents. If the Nuisance Control Service Establishment Amendment Bylaw is adopted, the District of Summerland portion of the requisition limit for the service would increase from $3,496 to $4,229. A home assessed at $700,000 would see an annual increase of 12 cents. Lisa Bloomfield, the Manager of Engineering Services with the RDOS, is available via Zoom should council have any questions regarding either of the services. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Could I ask you first, somebody to turn off the mic at the podium, please? Thank you, Kendra. Council, do you have questions of Kendra or alternately Lisa from the RDOS? Okay, could I have someone bring forward the resolution, please? Councillor Barkwa.
I'll move that council consent on behalf of the electors of the District of Summerland to the adoption of a regional district Okanagan-Similkameen Noxious Weed Control Service Establishment Amendment Bylaw number 2065.02/2021 and Nuisance Control Service Establishment Amendment Bylaw number 2198.02/2021.
Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Holmes. Further discussion? All in favor? That carries unanimously. Thank you, Lisa. Thanks, Kendra. And now on to letters of support for the Okanagan Collaboration Conservation Program. And Kendra, I think you were speaking to this. Yes, thank you.
So thank you again, Madam Mayor. So the Okanagan Collaborative Conservation Program has requested letters of support from the district for the grant applications to the Okanagan Basin Water Board for their projects Okanagan Lake Responsibility Planning Initiative and the Wetland Water Source Protection in a Climate Changing Landscape. The first project, the Okanagan Lake Responsibility Planning Initiative, is a silk-led planning process developed in response to a large-scale loss of natural areas around Okanagan Lake and to the cumulative impacts of resource extraction industries in the Okanagan watersheds. The second project is the Wetland and Water Source Protection in a Climate Changing Landscape, which is a research project that will develop a comprehensive inventory of wetlands in the Okanagan Basin that are most likely to exist into the future from the impacts of a changing climate. And representatives from the Okanagan Collaborative Conservation Program are available on Zoom should council have any questions regarding either of the proposed projects. And again, with that, if there's any questions from council for staff, I'm happy to take them.
Okay, any questions? Could I have someone bring forward the motion, please, to support these initiatives? Councillor Van Alphen?
Question, if I may first. Will this include some of the conversations that have been taking place on Trout Creek, west of the highway? You know, they're talk about creating the oxbows and more habitat in there for the spawning salmon. Will this be part of that, do you think? Sorry.
I'm going to defer that to the representatives from the OCCP, please.
Hi, Marty. Hi, Mayor and Council. Certainly, for the Okanagan Lake Responsibility Planning process, there's going to be a number of actions talking about restoration, but it won't be at that level of detail identifying, that specific project at this point in time. But certainly, there will be actions doing restoration in the Okanagan Basin.
Thank you.
Before you bring that forward, I have a question as well. And now that I see that Scott and Marcelo are here, at our last council meeting, we had a presentation, an application by another conservation group working on yellow flag iris in various areas, but including some spots here in Summerland along Eneas Creek. Is this, I just wanted to confirm that this is no, I'm sorry. No, I should have asked this question when we were talking about the RDOS noxious weeds. So never mind all of that. Never mind that. Councillor Van Alphen, if you could go ahead with the resolution, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That letter is be provided to the Okanagan Collaborative Conservation Program in support of their application to the Okanagan Basin Water Board for their project titled, can I get some help here?
Okanagan Lake.
Okanagan Lake Responsibility Planning Initiative and Wetland Water Source Protection in the Climate Changing Landscape.
Thank you.
I'd still like
Yes, I would love to hear Scott pronounce that word for us.
Please and thank you.
Okanagan Lake.
Yes.
Canuck.
Thank you.
Good luck.
A seconder, please. Councillor Traynor. And further discussion. Okay. I'd just like to say I'm really appreciative that you've brought this forward, and the letters have been prepared. They just need to be signed, and then they will get off to you so that you can submit them with your application later today. So thank you for bringing these forward. All in favor? Great. None against, so that's approved unanimously. Thanks again, you two.
Thank you.
Now to you, Lori, with the Recreation Center Feasibility Study Final Report, and that is being introduced by Graham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We are pleased to bring forward the final report on the Recreation Center Site Fit and Feasibility Study for Council today. We also have the consultants with us, whom Lori will introduce shortly. A few highlights from my perspective before I turn it over to Lori. Previous studies have demonstrated that there is unmet demand for recreation services in Summerland. Although the existing facility has served us well, likely the condition of the building and its size are factors which are limiting its ability to meet this demand. An investment in a new larger building would by extension result in larger revenues to help offset increased operational expenses of a larger building. If council permits further work on this project, a next step would be for staff to pursue grant opportunities and also for council to pursue advocacy with senior levels of government. Seeking substantial grant funds to offset the cost will take time, and if successful, amounts obtained will change the net cost of the project to the district. For this reason, we are recommending that we do not seek elector assent until Q2 of 2023 for this project. However, borrowing will be required even if grant dollars are obtained. But with this historic low interest rates we are seeing, timing works well for that. And due to council's prudent fiscal management, we are currently only using a fraction of our borrowing capacity. The existing facility was one of the first of its kind in the Okanagan Valley, and it has served the community and region very well. To some extent, it comes down to whether the district will continue to be in the recreation center business or not. If we are, then significant costs must be incurred either to build a new center or to maintain or renovate the existing one, which is at the end of its useful life, and those costs are growing. Today, we are submitting the report to council, but as will be described in the presentation, further decision-making by council will be required on specific elements, and that will come through separate council meetings at a later date. And with that, I'll turn over to Lori.
Thank you, CAO Stat. Good afternoon, Council. I am happy to report that after 8 months of extensive work led by the consulting team of Carskadden Stokes McDonald Architects in partnership with Meiklejohn Architectural Design Studio and Lees and Associates, with support from sub-consultants Sierra Planning and Management and LTA, the final report for the Recreation Center's feasibility and site fit study will be presented today. The focus of work was to explore 2 predetermined site locations for the replacement or renovation of the Summerland Aquatic and Fitness Center. 13205 Kelly Avenue, the current site beside the Summerland Secondary School, and 8820 Jubilee Road East on the Summerland Arena and Curling Club site. The project consultants will present a high-level overview of the final report and discuss sustainability options, cost-benefit analysis, recommendations, and proposed next steps. As Council will have noted from the agenda package documents, there has been a substantial amount of information gathered and reports developed to support this study. Staff recommend that Council receive the final report as information. Consider option B, core at Jubilee Road, to be confirmed as the preferred site strategy, and to target Q2 of 2023 for a referendum to obtain elector assent to enter into long-term borrowing for the design build of the Recreation Center. As Graham noted, this is to provide time to apply for grant funding and advocate for funding with other levels of government. Facility construction startup is still targeted for the beginning of 2024 if public support is provided. Staff propose returning to Council at a future date to discuss next steps, including confirmation on whether to proceed with a childcare facility or gymnasium or to consider phase in at a later date, any additional studies to complete, sustainability goals, additional stakeholder engagement and discussions that need to be completed, a funding strategy approach and possible grant opportunities, and a referendum process. As this will be the last meeting with the consulting team, this is an opportunity for Council to ask any follow-up questions or points of clarity regarding the reports provided to the various consultants that are attending today by Zoom. I will now turn to Glenn Stokes, the lead consultant, to take us through his presentation.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Council and Mayor Boot. Lori, as per usual, I'll ask if you can let me know if you can hear me okay and if I'm presenting okay.
We can hear you.
Fantastic. And now I will present. Good to go?
Good to go.
Thank you. So again, thank you for this chance to present. We are going to present a series of summary slides. I have 20 of them here, but many are repeats, so we can go rather quickly or come back as questions warrant. I have with me my core team members, including Cal and Tom from Mad Studio. Thank you, Cal and Tom. I have Megan from Lees and Associates here who will present 4 slides on the engagement. And I have John from Sierra who will be presenting 3 slides on the business piece of the cost benefit and assessment piece. And they'll be available to answer questions as well.
Excuse me?
Yep.
So this is Mayor Boot. Did you want us to wait until the end of the presentation, then ask questions, or as we go along? What's your preference?
Thank you, Mayor Boot. You know, this is really your show. So if you prefer to ask questions as we go along, we can make that work, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, 20 slides in total. So that gives you a feeling on how many we have. So if you go ahead and make a noise or put your hand up, I'll stop speaking and we can slow down. Let's see here. There we go. So briefly, we're going to just recap the project status update, recap the site options and overview, and then we'll get Megan to speak to the engagement now that we've completed that piece. We'll have John speak to the cost benefit assessment. I'll speak briefly about sustainability options, and that's new for you, and then the recommendations and next steps. You've all seen the slide before. It's just our kind of to-do list, and we are now, of course, at the end of our to-do list, which includes, confirming a preferred option, distilling concept options to the preferred option. We'll make recommendations in the preferred option, which we have in the report, including the site and phasing strategies, and we have some comments about the existing building. We'll discuss funding and as needed sort of capital funding and grants that are available. We'll also, again, as I said, recap engagement and recap and give you information on the business assessment piece. Then here we go. This is my cue. So what's happened since last time? We completed the public engagement and report, and we'll present those findings. We completed the cost benefit assessment and report, and we'll present those findings. We completed a review of sustainability opportunities, and I'll report on those. And then we completed the final report, including recommendations and next steps. And we will finish the slides with those items. So I will not spend too much time belaboring these next slides. These are all recap slides. They're here for the benefit of question and answer period, really. So as you might remember, we've identified 2 basic concept options. A was at Kelly, and it was identified to be on the footprint of the existing building. In other words, the existing building would be largely demolished or completely demolished, and a new facility would be located on the footprint of the older one. And we might all remember this was largely to do with the coordination with the school district. And then, of course, B is at Jubilee, and the preferred site identified to the south of the arena with a connection to the arena to make a comprehensive recreation complex. The parking was in the center of that site, and we have options for childcare. One of the options was illustrated on the slide as being that red box. And I'm happy to come back and speak more to these, of course. Option A then, as I said, was on the footprint of the existing building. I'm sure you all recall that made us or forced us into a 2-story option, which is illustrated. The ground floor is the all blue floor, and then kind of off and floating to the left is the second floor, and with a couple multi-purpose rooms and administration on the second floor. This option was sent to Lynn Thomas cost QS and came back at $38 million project cost for 2024, including escalation. And I mean, key to this item, of course, was not only did we sit it on the existing footprint, but in doing so, the existing services would have to be suspended for 18 months to 2 years. We assumed 2 years as a conservative estimate, while the new building was being constructed on the same site and then reopened. And option B is illustrated here as a one-story option, although if you were to proceed with this option, you might consider asking your next consultant team to test the two-story option to see if there was benefits there. I would point out that there's been we did a QA/QC review of the entire project over the last 4 weeks to 6 weeks. And this option was modified slightly as some mechanical space was missing in the costing estimate. So you last saw this at 37.4 million, and we've revised it to 38.3 million. And I would just point out, squinting from a sort of satellite, really what we're saying is the projects are still basically the same cost, whether it's on A or B. And this has just been reconciled in order to make sure that they are truly apples to apples. So I would point that out. And the benefit here, one of the main benefits, of course, of this project is this can be constructed while the existing facility remains open, and then should be able to have a seamless transition of operations and users over to this facility when you open it. So that's the architectural piece. I'm going to let Megan speak to her 4 slides, which is starting with this piece.
Thanks, Glenn. I won't spend too much time on this because I think you've seen this slide a couple times now, but just building on past engagement, this current project really was focused on identifying the opportunities and challenges of the 2 sites and exploring the concept options with the public and stakeholders to identify one preferred option that met the feasibility and technical requirements as well as the community's needs. Next slide, please. There were 2 main phases and then a final reporting out phase. The first phase was focused on site stakeholders as well as the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee and the Recreation and Health Center Steering Committee and the school district. The second round of engagement brought the concept options forward to the public to provide an opportunity for them to provide comments on the options overall, as well as asking some specific questions to understand why people had the opinions they did. And now we're coming forward to report on the findings of the online survey, the public open house. We did the sort of the overview in January, and this is the wrap up of all the engagement findings. Next slide, please. Overall, in addition to previous engagement, which had 600 and 300 responses to surveys during the needs assessment, the current participation for the feasibility and site fit study was nearly 500 survey responses, which I feel is very strong. 44 people attended the public open house sessions. There were 2 sessions available. And then there was an extensive reach through social media and the ongoing project email list to get the word out. So we have engaged with council, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, the project steering committee, as well as site stakeholders and the public through this process. Next slide, please. But really, just to sum it up, the key findings from this round of engagement continue to confirm the community's enthusiasm and interest in the project. The existing aquatic and fitness center is a highly valued community asset, and there's excitement about the possibilities of this new facility and how it will meet the needs of the community in the long term. There were no showstoppers per se or significant changes really to the facility program as a result of the consultation with site stakeholders, although continued conversations may be necessary, particularly around the parking configuration. The preferred option by an overwhelming majority is in line with the report that's coming forward today for the option on Jubilee Road adjacent to the arena. Primarily, really, it was due to the opportunity to keep the existing aquatic and fitness center open. There were over 200 comments to this effect, with community members just noting the hardship of having to travel to other communities, the challenge of keeping people engaged in recreation if the existing facility was closed. There were also about 85 comments noting just the benefits of having this sort of a recreation campus with the arena and the new recreation center together. There's benefits to families participating in multiple activities, potential operational efficiencies and sharing of resources and equipment. And just some of the main concerns, as we've heard kind of throughout the process and the previous engagement activities, main concern continues to be around the project cost and how the project will be funded in a sustainable manner. Although I'll note there were only 33 comments out of the 500 survey responses to that effect. There were also about 19 comments about parking, such as concerns about what would happen if there were overlapping events at the arena and pool. I think things that can be addressed. And just to note that during the open house, there was a presentation by the consulting team and followed by conversations with community members. There were some questions that came up about what would happen to the existing aquatic and fitness center as well if redevelopment didn't occur at that location. And some questions, just about future additions to the new recreation center, such as the childcare facility. So that really summarizes the engagement, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end of the presentation. I'll turn it back to you, Glenn.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you very much. The next 3 slides are regarding the cost benefit assessment, which was completed in the last section of this project, and I invited John from Sierra Planning Management to come present these slides. So John, take it away. Oh, I think you're muted, John.
Thanks, Glenn. So we just have several slides which summarize the material that we reviewed and assessed, and it follows the options that were developed, the 2 options there that have been presented and the consultation that happened with them. And there's a lot of alignment in terms of looking at this through a financial lens with what has gone before in terms of some of the design imperatives and benefits, and then what is being indicated from the public. So just on this slide, this is the most important one. The capital costs are, as Glenn has stated, they're up around sort of $38 million, but our focus was really on what is the scale of commitment, operationally speaking, in terms of deficits. And obviously I don't need to remind anyone, because you have an existing facility, that these sorts of facilities are deficit creators. And the real question is, what happens if you build something new and something bigger in terms of that annual commitment? So what we did is run through a fairly detailed operational business plan type exercise, and that's at the back of the report if anyone's interested. And you can see there that generally speaking, there's, you're increasing by about 60% the size of the building. And so the costs are going to go up. But as you can see from the resulting figures, and I'll just take a moment to explain those, we've aligned options A and option B together in terms of the projections of their net operating income, or their annual deficit position, and compared that to what we've referred to as a baseline. And the baseline is the existing facility projected out into the future. So if you don't do anything at all, but just with the sort of pre-pandemic experience of that facility in terms of the operating deficit, running it off into the future. And so that is the comparison there. And I would just point out that we've been very generous to the baseline in suggesting that even though this building the existing building is beyond its functional life, that somehow it's going to be able to maintain its current level of deficit as opposed to decline even more. So in reality, it may worsen. But what came out of this analysis is, with a reasonable approach to revenue generation, which reflects the demand that we think is there for a new facility, if we just take option B, for example, versus the baseline, you can see there in each of the years, there's very little difference in terms of the net operating income. In other words, the deficit that you have to support through the tax base or other means. But you're getting a much bigger and much better building, and a building obviously that's going to be there for the next 40 years. There is a bit of a difference between option A and option B in the early years. And what that does is reflect our assessment of risk. And that dovetails with what Megan had just indicated to you about the concern that residents have with the loss of a facility. So while residents may be concerned, obviously, with the disruption to a normal schedule, having to drive to other locations, from a financial lens, we are concerned that that represents a risk of losing your market. Not entirely, not so dramatically that the revenues can't be clawed back, but we've assumed that's going to take a few years to do that. So although you will close that facility and it will reopen in option A on the same site, there is the problem that you may not be able to generate the revenues as quickly as if you were to keep the existing building open and construct the new project over by the arena. So that's what we see here. In terms of the general operating deficits, they are going to increase slightly due to inflation, but it's fairly typical for a building of this scale. Next slide, please. So this one I'm not going to spend any time on. This is just a graphic representation of each of those buildings, scenarios, I should say, the baseline operating and then versus option A and option B, but essentially is shown in the previous chart that we had here. So let's move on to the next final slide on this. So we've certainly concluded ourselves that option B is a better option, and we suspect for reasons beyond financial as well. As we mentioned, there is that risk of closure if you have to go with option A, but also, as indicated, the benefit of linked recreational experiences, having an arena and a pool on one campus, is something that it's hard to put a number on it in terms of its benefit, but it's intuitive that people will take advantage of that. What we have done is not generated more revenues as a result. We haven't gone down that path of making recommendations we can't back up. We've kept really the revenues the same. We're just recognizing that early on, option A is one where you're having to claw back the market share that you have. And just a quick note at the bottom there, we oftentimes talk in terms of capital costs, and they can be quite high. But as you can see there, in terms of cumulative totals, the operating deficits over a period of, in this case, 25 years, starts to add up. And as you can see there, it's fairly significant. So what that tells us is, focus on the operating benefits of one approach versus another, and not just the capital costs as well. So with that, I'll just hand it back to Glenn, and I'd be happy, obviously, to take any questions at the end.
Thank you, John. Well done. Thank you for that. Undoubtedly, there will be some questions. So, and I don't hear anyone jumping out right now. So I'm going to carry on. We have just a little more to do, and then, of course, we'll go through the questions.
Yeah.
My new piece is really about sustainability. Our new piece with the group at MAD as well. So we had a couple puzzle pieces to put together. One was reviewing the District of Summerland's current position and reviewing the corporate energy and emissions management plan and referencing them to this project. There are three main pillars of that plan, including commitment to building energy, building efficient buildings and resilient facilities, which makes good sense. Optimizing setting and orientation of new buildings, obviously to maximize on energy efficiency and minimize impact, and include renewable energy in new construction and major renovations. So, we'll talk a little bit about sustainable strategies in the next slide, but I think it'd be reasonable to state that the project would include these where practical. And of course, some things like the siting, for instance, we are limited to those choices based on kind of practical parts of the site. Carry on. So then we also looked at sustainability standards. So these are standards that a project or projects can enlist in officially, in other words, get certified for, which the certification process includes some extra consulting and paperwork and costs associated, or you can quote unquote shadow some of these things, which might skip a couple of the registration and certification procedures, but would attempt to implement all of the actual capital and operating benefits into the project itself. So in either case, some of the practical choices might be BC step code, step one. We've included because it's been noted in our research, and it's basically at this point a requirement of new construction. So it's included in the costs and the assumptions we made to date. You can do LEED silver or gold, which is a perfectly practical choice for this kind of project. It's been done for this kind of project and many times in Canada and BC. Does come at sort of a conceptual premium in order to accomplish some of the requirements of that certification. And then partner certification, actually by the same group, CAGBC, is the zero carbon design standard, which you may have heard about. It's quite popular recently in current grant funding applications to be working towards this standard. Which is less points and less onerous than the LEED standard, but really focuses on reducing your carbon footprint. Then under the not recommended, under the not recommended, apologies, actually it's other sustainability standards researched is the next category. So these are ones that you could choose to do, or some projects do, but one might argue is not terribly practical. CAGBC zero carbon as a construction standard, which is very difficult to attain in aquatic centers due to the amount of energy required to dehumidify the air and heat the water. It's not being undertaken. It's only being undertaken in I think one pool in BC to date, and that's in New West. There's passive house standards you may have heard of before, which are excellent standards, but are extremely difficult for aquatic centers. And so they're not recommended. And then there's green globes, which is a parallel standard we're not as familiar with, as LEED and zero carbon are far more common. And then finally, under the not recommended is the living building challenge, just pointing out the full range of sustainability standards. This is very few buildings in Canada have achieved this standard, and no aquatic centers. And it would be, I think, perhaps prohibitive and unreasonable to attempt that standard. So we'll speak a little more about this in upcoming slides. But I'll just recap that a lot of the aspirations can be included in the price that we've indicated, or the estimate. If the council decided they had a commitment towards a certified LEED Gold building and or certified zero carbon building, we are recommending considering some additional capital premiums to be added to that process in order to help ensure success to reach those certification standards. Grant application opportunities, just what's on the street right now, includes the likelihood of the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings GICB program. It was out, I think, last year, and then I think the Fed said that it would be coming out again, and so we're waiting for the intake to be announced, but all arrows point towards the likelihood that it's going to come out. And then Clean BC Communities Fund, I believe, is a provincial fund, and it's currently open at this time. So we can speak more to those if need be, but these are grant opportunities that might be available for consideration. And then finally, we have put together in the report and here a series of recommendations and next steps for your consideration, just to help you understand what kinds of choices are yet ahead of you as a council. So one, of course, receive and review the completed report and feasibility study that you should have received at this time. Two, the consultants are recommending proceeding with preferred site strategy option B, core at Jubilee. For the reasons as identified, strong support from the community, I think strong support from the business assessment, and I think a strong opportunity for synergy at the site on Jubilee from the architect's point of view. What has not been decided definitively is what the relationship with the childcare is for this project. So this is to be considered whether to incorporate it into this project or as a future enhancement. So the district may in fact elect to review and prepare application for the Childcare BC New Spaces Fund, open in 2022. I'm sure many folks know that childcare currently is a strong support from province and the feds in for grant funding at this time. So you could run that project by itself, or you could consider like combining it with the aquatic center, perhaps. 4, continue to design to reduce risks and improve precision of cost estimate. Oh, that's my words. That just means there's a couple of little things you can do to reduce your risk as you proceed to this project, including, presuming option B is preferred, you could do a civil connections and geotechnical conditions assessment of the site or of the parking lot. I think for modest costs, you might do get a geotechnical report with some boreholes and investigate and double check civil connections. And those reviews would go a long way to reducing what are often the largest risk items when you're proceeding with a construction project. In other words, subsurface conditions. So that's something that I think might be interesting to consider. A larger chunk might be to consider a full schematic design with a consultant team, which would be the first piece of the design phase and would, ratify the layouts, the rooms disposition, the structural disposition, the mechanical and electrical systems that you might undertake, and you would then end up with a much more detailed feasibility and schematic design project for the site. We can answer more questions as needed. Number 5, consider district climate action goals. Define any sustainability standards that you might feel that you'd like to target. Consider applying for the grants. So the core project at Jubilee allows for a building that meets basic sustainability standards, for example, step code, and also I think meets the intent of the core pillars of the district. However, if certification is something that is a desire of council, for example, LEED or CAGBC zero carbon design standards, we recommend considering adding some additional project costs to cover those aspirations. 6, continue public engagement and consultation with stakeholders. Council and staff may elect to strategize an education awareness campaign to further gather community support and advance the referendum. And of course, we've noted this before, a continued engagement with the new Timber Mart ownership is recommended during the design phase to work together with your neighbor. 7, commission and complete a site-specific parking study. Recommend to establish a more accurate parking needs and arrangement within the addition of the new project at the arena site. And this could be undertaken as part of the future detailed phase for this project. Number 8, complete condition assessment of the Summerland Arena. I understand this is underway and we'll go towards adding more beneficial information for the overall project. 9, review options for the existing aquatic and recreation facility and then continue engagement with the school district 67. If desired, of course, we made a note here that you may choose to continue consultation with the school district. And in particular, you'll want to probably debate what is to be done with the existing building if you proceed with the preferred option. So the existing building might be renovated for something such as childcare or cultural recreation, but this consultant team would note that only the aquatic use was noted as preferred by the school district during our consultation. So this is a piece of the puzzle that would probably require some further work on your behalf or by yourselves. And then finally, consider completing a funding strategy to outline a detailed costing analysis for funding for the future rec center, including cost to Summerland residents. Those are the 10 to-do items that we've identified. I just have the schedule here as a final slide, and we are at the final report stage and completed. Those are the slides. So I will say thank you once again, and I will pass to Lori or Mayor Boot for questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. You've really gotten through a fair bit of information in a short period of time, so thanks for that. I have Councillor Barkwell and then Councillor Holmes with questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think I've answered my own question, so I'm gone.
That's always good. Councillor Holmes.
Yes, thank you very much. So thank you for the cost benefit analysis of the operations. I was quite encouraged to see that that we're not going to be ending up paying a lot more in operations down the road on this. But my question is, so the option B site, basically has a better costings due to, you identified 3 things: clawing back the market share, synergy with the arena and aquatic center staff, and the energy savings. Of those 3, is there any kind of weighting given to each one? Like how much does one have more bearing or less bearing over the other?
Yes, thank you for the question. Through you, Madam Mayor. We didn't really do it in terms of a weighting. We went in and on those 3 items really asked the question of each independently. So on just to take, for example, the possibility of some energy savings, we sort of broadly outlined what those savings can be, sort of in the $50,000 range, as you can see. But there is some due diligence required to see whether that can actually be achieved, but we certainly hope and suspect it probably can be, given the location next to the arena. On the issue of savings from staff, it's a single-story building, which is always a little bit of a savings, although we have not on that basis factored in any difference between A and B, because it is a fairly detailed and esoteric distinction. But those that operate facilities know that having to go up a flight of stairs into a second floor can create some duplication. But we've essentially kept the staff complement pretty much the same. But over time, depending on how that campus of recreation develops, there is the opportunity to perhaps generate some staff savings, savings in purchasing of items, things of that nature, security, whatever it might be for events down the road. And that's principally it. As it relates to that issue of the closure of the pool, you can see from the chart that Glenn's put back up there, that basically gets sorted out by about 2030 or 2029, after about 4 years. So it's short-lived, but it will be 4 years where I think you can expect there's going to be quite a bit of a distinction between option A or option B if you were to do that. But everything gets washed out at the end either way.
Follow up, if I may. And you kind of touched on it there, but I was just wondering, does the design of the building have any bearing on the operational costs, i.e. whether it's 1-story or 2-story?
Again, through you, Madam Mayor, I think it does. I think my colleagues at Cascadon probably have would have some comments perhaps to add to that. There are probably good examples of going up one or 2 stories, and then some less effective designs, and it's all a question of how tight the site is. But from our very general perspective, if you can do everything on a single floor, then operationally speaking, that is conceptually a benefit, and you should try and stick to that. But maybe Glenn has something to add to that.
Thank you for the question, and through the mayor. Yeah, for a 2-story or multi-story building, at best, your staffing efficiency will match a single-story building if your design team and operational staff are nearly perfect. And at worst, there will be a penalty for multi-story buildings as a general rule.
I have others, but if somebody else wants to ask.
Is it related to the cost-benefit assessment?
Well, it's related to 1 or 2 stories, but it's okay. We can come back to it. I can come back.
Okay. Councillor Carlson, did you have a question? No. While we're on the cost-benefit assessment, I just wanted to ask, it shows option A decreasing for the first 4 years, and then in 2030, it shows it starting to climb again. Why is that? I mean, I know that all of the rest, like if you look at option B, it's continuing to climb through that. But I'm wondering why it's going down and then climbing up again.
Why it does that. Well, there's a couple of just different processes going on. One is that I think we start, and I have to look at the details in the report, but in year one, we said that essentially option A is going to only manage to claw about 45% of the revenue that you might be able to get in option B. And then it's going to go gradually up. So it then goes up to sort of 60%. And by year 4, you get to 100%. At the same time, all of these revenues and costs are subject to some escalation. And we've used 3% as a reasonable estimate of general escalation. And what that really means is we're not trying to, crystal ball exactly what escalation is going to be operationally, but we know that if you've got a deficit now, there's going to be some escalation. And if everything holds constant, that gap is going to widen a little bit based on escalation, just the time value of money. So that's why you see the improvement generally to get to 2029, but everything is escalating, and so the deficit escalates as well. And it goes up from 2030 as well, as you can see there.
Great, thank you for that. Councillor Barkwell?
I think maybe you touched on sort of the same topic for me. On that cost benefit analysis, you say, you use the term the difference in net operating interest represents a considerable, do you mean net operating income? I'm looking at to the side of the table on cost benefit and assessment.
Yes, it's net operating income. That's my error, so I apologize.
And so what was the percentage reduction in revenue you think that there would be in, basically revenue equals attendance because of that you assume for having a pool closed?
Yeah, I'm just going to, while I'm on screen, I'm just going to find that momentarily, just so you have that precise number. Be here shortly. Yeah. So what we've indicated that in year one, based on what we would see to be otherwise achievable revenues at a normalized state, year one for option A is able to get 45% of it. And option B, we had it pitched at 90%, working on the basis that no business, no venture is going to start, operating at 100%. There's a little bit of learning going on in any new building. So that's at 90%, but by year 2 and onwards, option B is operating essentially at the revenues that you think it can. And it doesn't mean that revenues aren't going to be able to grow if you get more and more demand, and this building has got a great reputation to it for people well beyond Summerland. But in option A, year 1 was at 45% of revenue, so that was the discount. Year 2, 70%. Year 3, it achieves 90%. And it essentially operates on a parity basis with option B by year 4. So I will tell you straight away that is an arbitrary assessment on our part, but it reflects a risk, which if you read our executive summary in our report at the back, we're very clear that closing your pool is a disruption, that you can expect there to be some problem in getting people to come back, or you're going to have to put a lot of effort into marketing and keeping people engaged in the new project. So that's what we wanted to convey in these numbers. But by the time you get to around year 4, year 5, that issue will have resolved itself.
So I can continue on this topic. Yeah. So. So like 2035, you show a difference of about $50,000 in the locations, and does it swing the other way? Because when you get to the table on page 13, the total cumulative revenues, well, maybe it's related to the cost, but there's only a small difference between the total at the other, by the end of your period here.
Yeah.
And there's a much larger difference in the beginning, so it must swing the other way or something.
No, it's and I appreciate that, but as I say to a lot of people, don't study it too hard. What that is over the period of 25 years, when you add all the numbers up, these are the numbers you get. The other way we do it, just to sort of confuse everyone a little bit more, is use the concept of present value. And if you use present value, basically you discount all of the revenues. So the revenue in year 25 gets brought all the way back to today, and the revenue in year 2 and 3 gets brought back today. And so, that's another way of looking at it. But what we're really saying is here, over a period of 25 years, once you get past that first couple of years where there is a sizable difference between these options, they then operate very much the same. So if you did choose option A as an example, and you were able to take on board and justify that risk associated with the closure of the pool, once it's up and running and moving, there's not going to be a lot of difference between option A and option B. But based on what we're seeing today and the design issues and these risks, option B is better by a margin.
So have you done a net present value calculation?
We have.
One of these things,
Yeah.
I don't see it identified as a net present value.
No, this isn't. This is a cumulative total that's on the
Yeah.
chart, but in the report there is a net present value difference of between option A and option B, and it's contained in the 5th chapter of that detailed report.
Yeah, so we're just looking here. Okay, so that's there, but we're looking at these numbers here, and
Sure.
And have you taken into account then the savings that we would have in the dollars we would save for having a pool closed for 18 months? And how do you take into account the value of the land that is free at the one location versus using up a potential land for expansion of the arena at the other location?
Yes, and those are great questions, and through you, Madam Mayor. So on the issue of the savings by closing the pool for 2 years during 2024 and 2025, on a present value basis, and it's in the back of the report, page 26. It's about just under $1 million, about just under $900,000 that you would save, and so there is that, and then there is you weigh that against keeping the pool open in terms of the revenues you get from that, and it essentially it's not a significant difference. And in our view, and it may not be anyone else's, but in our view, talking about $700,000 and $800,000, that's not enough to assuage anyone of the risk. The most effective way to go forward to minimize your risk is to keep that pool open until you build a new one. And that would be the same if we were talking about rinks or anything else that has a market that people that exists for that particular facility. Now on the land issue, that again, and I appreciate the question. We have not factored in the ability for you to take the land that you own and use it for other purposes. And I recognize that you could put a highest and best use value to that, although it is in option A, it is obviously on the adjacent to the school, so there's going to be some limits on what you might be able to do there. But no, we did not factor in highest and best use on the land. Hopefully that helps.
Trainer.
I apologize if this has already been mentioned, but I'm just wondering if somebody could remind me the cost of demoing the current pool if we do decide to go with option B. Do we have a cost estimate for that at all?
Thank you, Councillor, through the mayor. Yes, we do. I'm going to ask Matthias in the background to send that to me, and if you will bear with me, I will come back and answer that question, unless John has it.
Yeah, I was going to say, by all means, Glenn, get the precise number, but I believe for option A, it's in the order around $900,000, something like that.
So if we went with option B, we would need to add about $1 million for demo of the current pool.
Yes, you would. My read of that is that yes, you would. If you don't keep the building open for some reason, if there was something else you could do in the building, fill the floor in and operate it, then if it was to be demolished, there would be that cost.
Okay, thank you.
Lori?
Yeah, my understanding, Glenn, it's 1.1 million for the demolition of the current facility.
Councillor Holm, oh no, sorry, we'll go back to you in a second. We'll go to Graham first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to further augment, I believe the 1.1 doesn't include the cost escalation to 2024, whereas the build numbers do. Just a slight point of accuracy there on demo.
Could you say that again, please? It didn't really translate for
Yeah, so the build costs for these options, the build costs include escalation to 2024 pricing. But I believe the demolition costs do not. So that's a straight estimate in today's value, and we would see probably those costs edging up a little bit from that 1.1. Just wanted to sort of provide that extra accuracy.
Great, thank you. Now I understand. Councillor Holmes.
Yes, thank you. So I would hope that a site fit study I would come out of it knowing whether what we're proposing fits on the site or not. And I still have some questions regarding, for example, do we have sufficient parking? And we're told that, we need to do a site-specific parking study to find out that. And so I'm just wondering why, that wasn't done as part of this study, because we need to know whether it actually fits on this site or not. And secondly, we've talked previously about tweaking option B, so it could be 2 stories. And if that would, how much parking would that, additionally create for us, and whether it's necessary. And we're being told now that the next consultant team would have to look at that. And then we're also being asked to decide whether the daycare should be part of all this. And when we see it in the plans there, well, we don't really know, because we don't know if it's going to fit on the site because of the parking requirements, which we don't know. So I'm just wondering, why weren't these part of the site fit study? Because it seems to be pretty important for determining whether this site works or not.
Thank you for the question through the mayor. Parking study was completed by this team, including a full zoning analysis of all the parking that is required by the facilities on site, and both projects illustrate a compliant parking solution. What is recommended in a future study is to dovetail in any district or Summerland-wide parking study with consideration of the study on the site, as you may discover more detailed nuances. For example, you may discover that your zoning bylaw requirement has overestimated the amount of parking, or perhaps even underestimated the amount of parking based on actual usage, times of day, and particularities of the site, which were not part of our project. So based on your own zoning bylaw, both projects are illustrating a parking compliant solution.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Councillor Barkwell.
I have to thank Councillor Trainer for bringing up that question. I would have assumed that demolition of the previous, the existing building would have been included in the cost benefit analysis here. I'm very disappointed that it isn't. And I haven't looked through the detailed schedule, but I just wanted to check. Are you sure it's not included yet? Okay, that certainly changes the picture by over $1 million. I thank you very much, Councillor Trainer.
Not that it's up to me to point this out, but even at 1.1 million or 1.3 million for the demolition, it still falls very closely in line with option A. Lori.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through to Councillor Barkwell and to Glenn. My understanding that it wasn't included because it wasn't predetermined if that demolition was going to happen. So the future of that site hasn't been confirmed at this time or part of this project. It's part of a next step, and so that's Correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, but that was the reason why it was separated out.
Through the mayor, thank you, Lori. Yeah, it's, the demolition cost is in the report and it's kept separate for option B, preserving that as an opportunity and a choice that the council can make in the future.
Okay, Councillor Holmes has another question.
Well, just a comment on that. I would add that even that it's not even determined whether it's our responsibility or not. Is it our building? We don't know.
Okay, other questions? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It goes back to the parking and the proposed daycare. We own that other building beside the RCMP station, which is functioning as a daycare today. And, you know, I don't understand why we're possibly looking at another one when we already own that land and that could be a daycare. Anyways, there's that. It was also mentioned earlier that we should have continuous conversations with the Timber Mart, keep them in the loop. I'd also recommend that we may need to be keeping the neighbors to the east in the 55 plus subdivision next door. Maybe want to keep them in the loop too. Thank you.
We certainly will have the opportunity to have more discussions on the childcare situation in the next steps. So that'll be good. Yeah, good thought on continuing bringing people up to date in that area. Okay, are there any other questions for the whole group of consultants that we have while we have them for this final time? Then it'll be up to Lori to, to relay all kinds of things back and forth. Okay, so you have, I think it's 4 resolutions before you. Would someone like to bring those forward, please? Councillor Holmes, actually, just before you get started, I just wanted to check something. Yes, okay, it does show option B. That you can change that if you like, but that's what's written there. So if you'd like to bring that forward, Councillor Holmes, or did you have another question?
No, I was going to bring forward the motion.
Thank you.
That the Recreation Center feasibility and site fit study final report as attached to the report from the Director of Community Services dated February 28th, 2022 be received, and that option B, core at Jubilee Road as outlined in the Recreation Center feasibility and site fit study final report be confirmed as the preferred site strategy, and that staff return to council at a future date to confirm next steps with council. And further, that staff target Q2 2023 for a referendum to obtain elector assent to enter into long-term borrowing for the design and build of the Recreation Center.
Thank you. Seconder? Councillor Traynor?
Sorry. You said site B, right?
Yes.
Did you? Okay, I'll second it.
Thank you. Okay, so that's on the floor now for the discussion. Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, at this time, the difference between the 2 locations on a revenue or cost basis there doesn't seem to be that great. When you add in $1 million in savings from having the pool closed and $1.1 million plus to tear down the old location, which I presume is included in the price, maybe I should check, is the price to rebuild in that same location is factored into that includes the cost of tearing down the old pool?
Madam Mayor, may I answer that question?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you for your question. So the project cost for option A includes the demolition cost of the existing building. The project cost for option B as presented does not include the demolition of the existing building.
Okay. And our CAO made reference to the fact that perhaps the cost of demolition that we were given at 1.1 wasn't an updated cost, but I presume then that your option A does include an updated cost.
Thank you for your question. Just to dig a little deeper, $800,000 was assigned to the demolition of the existing building in option A, assuming it was completed early in the lifespan of this project, like at the beginning of construction. $1.2 million was assigned to the demolition of the building in option B, assuming that it was demolished, after completion of the building. So that accommodates time.
So you see a 50% increase for waiting 2 years longer?
In short, that's, should see. Sorry, maybe I'll back up and take a moment to review my numbers. I'm not sure I'm reporting them accurately, but basically I will say though that option A included the cost and option B had it as an add cost.
Okay. So as I was leading up to Madam Mayor, if you consider the additional cost of tearing down the pool, the additional savings from being closed, the prices are very similar, and the deciding factor for me is that the value of the land and the options, keeping our options open at the arena for any future facilities that we might want, the expansion of the arena at some point down the road, 20 years, I don't know, or something else that comes up. So I can't support that location. I'm going.
Okay. Councillor Traynor?
So I am going to support option B. I think that it is a good location. I like the way we would be grouping all of our rec facilities in one area. I have balanced this idea that I have now with what Councillor Barkle just said about, possibly in the future wanting to build a second arena, but I don't think that's going to be happening for a long time. And so I kind of have to weigh that. And so I do think that putting the pool there is a good option as well. That when we talked about this at the Parks and Rec Advisory Committee, almost everybody was concerned about the fact that we would have no pool for 2 years. That was a really big concern. And I think that we will lose people. I think that they'll go to Penticton or they might start going to private facilities. And I think it might be hard to get them back. So I think that option B, they are both close in cost, but at this time, I think that it is the best option.
Councillor Van Alphen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question through to our Director of Recreation. Penticton went through that. They went through a pool closure, correct? When they built their new facility. Did they find such a huge loss of participants? Or did they come back quite rapidly once the new aquatic center was there?
Through Madam Mayor to Councillor Van Alphen, I can't speak specifically on that. I don't have the numbers in front of me, and I wouldn't feel comfortable responding to that. Sorry.
I think I just wanted to comment. I think one thing that we need to remember, whether we're talking about the cost or the number of people that may or may not come back or will be able to use the facility after it's built, regardless of where it is. We need to remember that the option to have this same size of facility, larger than the one that's there, is not available to us at the existing site. We need to remember that. We need to compare apples to apples, not apples to oranges. Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My other question is, I guess through to our CAO, at time of referendum, will the demolition costs and all costs be included in that referendum when it goes to the public? So there's no surprises 2 years down the road going, oh, by the way, now we need another $1.5 million to do a demo possibly. You know, I just want to make sure that the public is 100% aware of the dollars and cents.
Through the mayor, Councillor Van Alphen, thank you for your question. Absolutely. So our effort would be to get very, very particular on those costs, and also, of course, try to offset some of them with grant funding. And we really need to be extremely accurate, because when we go for voter assent, we don't want to have to go back again if we've misestimated in some way the cost that will be facing us. So absolutely, we'll be getting a sharper pencil on some of those more particular items. And I think these just show us what has been referenced, I believe, Class C sort of costs, which have a broad range at this point in terms of their estimation.
Thank you. Through to our CEO and through to our mayor, if I may, Madam Mayor. I don't know if I'm too late on this one, but we have UBCM coming up this fall. Can we make this a priority at UBCM to go and see if we can solicit some support from senior government in maybe some type of grant funding for this project? Do you think that would be a worthwhile conversation to have at UBCM?
In short, absolutely. Just like we have in the last 3 years, I think it's really important now that we have more, now that we are closer, like further down the road, and we have an idea where the site will be and the costs and those things that are associated with it. I think that absolutely we should, that should be a strong focus of probably one of many, but at our UBCM conversations with ministers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just, I know in the past 3 years, and I know we did that, but I know in the past 3 years, the Health and Wellness Center component was involved in this. Right now, we're talking strictly recreation facility for the public, for our taxpayers here in Summerland. So I just want to make sure that they know exactly what we're talking about today, not 3 years ago. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. The whole idea, just like the food hub, is to keep ministers updated on our progress. Yeah. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So a couple of things that I like about the site over at Jubilee is the opportunity to actually create some efficiencies, and I think that that would be lost if this was rebuilt in the location at Kelly Avenue. Part of the challenge, I think, has been working with the school district and making, understanding how it could fit any other way, because I think it would be a good location to keep it right downtown on Kelly Avenue. But from what I've seen, it doesn't seem like there's a willingness to work together well enough to make it the facility that will be there for the next 50 years. And so I think that going over to where we already have our own arena and integrating it into that is going to be a good way to move forward. One of the things that I know, parking comes up quite a bit. Our current facility doesn't have enough parking most of the time. I mean, during COVID, maybe it's not so bad because there's limited numbers of people actually using the facility, but you go on a recoat morning when there's also swim club and lessons and all things going on, and it's really busy. And so I think it's important to recognize that parking might be an issue at Jubilee, but it would be an even bigger issue if it was kept on Kelly Avenue. And that wasn't addressed. I don't think that could be addressed based on the footprint and on the conversation that had been had with the school district. There is a parking lot there, but it is considered the student parking lot, not the swimming pool parking lot. And I know that a lot of residents, they use it on weekends and other times when there's not kids parked there, but it's a little bit less welcome when there's lots of students that are using that parking lot. So just another very simple reason that moving it all into one place is a good idea. I do think that the daycare conversation, I see that, we could be applying for funding right away. When would that have to actually be used? I do think that there's some merit to having more conversation with the folks who are running the daycare right now, find out if there might be an opportunity to have a bigger, better, more community-based daycare over in that location as well. And I don't know if, if that can be part of this conversation going forward before we go to referendum, but I do think it's worth putting it on the timeline to try and make that happen prior to 2023. I think that's all I'm going to say, and hopefully we can move this forward quickly. Thank you.
I'm just going to ask a question of the CEO before I go on to Councillor Holmes. If I'm recalling correctly, you have had conversations with Little Chicks Daycare, and at this time, anyways, they wanted to, status quo with what it is now. Is that correct?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, so some conversations have been had in the production of this report in terms of those stakeholder interviews, and it's our understanding that right now their preference would be to continue to operate in their current function. Looking at Lori if she needs to enhance that response.
Yeah, thank you, CEO Stat. That is correct. They do want to continue. One of the considerations in the previous funding opportunities through the New Spaces childcare granting opportunities that there were restrictions on being a nonprofit organization or a municipally led operation versus a private. So we would have to have conversations about that if we were to partner with a private operator.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes, thanks for waiting.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so, for option B, I do have some concerns regarding parking, whether there's sufficient parking, but I think that can be worked out. I think we can work that out. And when we're talking about a site fit, I can see it fitting on option B on that site. On option A, I've held back on questions on option A because I just kind of dismissed it as soon as we ran into that roadblock with the school board, and so when we're talking strictly about whether what we're proposing is going to fit on that site or not, I just don't see it fitting on that option A site. Not in the current state. So maybe we could have further discussions, escalated politically with the school board, but then I can only see that delaying the project much further. And once that building's an empty shell, then the school board's we're going to have to engage with the school board further down the road anyways, and I believe there'll be opportunities down the road for that location to become some sort of benefit for the community but it's something that we need to work on with the school board. But right now with the school board, from what we've received from them, there's no way we could put what we're proposing there. It's just not going to work. And so the only option is option B as far as I'm concerned.
CAO?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And just to add for council, and it is in the presentation, but also just the point, we did a lot of public outreach on this, and the strong preference on the part of the community is that option B because of the delay in a build site of option A. That is, if we had to have a 2-year hiatus with access to those facilities. So I know it's in your mind already, but that's in large part to what's also informed some of our focus on our own recommendation for council today.
Okay, any further discussion on the resolution that's on the floor? Councillor Van Elfen.
It's just back to Councillor Holmes' comments. We may still have to play ball with the school board. If this doesn't go through, we may be back to square zero and may have to look at an alternative We don't know that. We won't know that until the public speaks in a referendum. So in the meantime, we keep all our cards on the table and we keep lines of communication open with everyone. And we hope, I'm not disagreeing with option B, but we don't know if it's going to happen. And we'll go from there. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Councillor Van Elfen, which is one of the reasons why we have a meeting coming up with the school board. We want to keep working on that relationship, just like we do with the Penticton Indian Band. Okay, any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Barkwell is opposed, so that carries. Thank you, Council. Let's have a break. We'll break until, oh, pardon me. Thank you so much, Glenn and your team, or a variety of teams, I guess, and Lori. This has been a long, long process, and you've dug up lots of information for us from your own work and from working with the community. So thanks again for that. I'm sure this isn't goodbye, but it's so long for now. I appreciate your time today as well. Thank you. So we'll break until 3:30. We're about, 35 minutes behind. Okay. I guess Kendra is, oh, I'll just wait for. Okay. You good to go, Kendra?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
So,
Oh, go ahead.
can I go?
Yeah, I'll just let you introduce the whole thing.
Cool. Okay, so before council is a report requesting council consideration to provide staff direction on the method to conduct a review of mayor and council remuneration in accordance with policy 100.17. So a brief background on council remuneration. Prior to 2019, the mayor's remuneration was set at $26,000 and each councillor set at $11,500. In 2018, a review of councillor remuneration was conducted by the Councillor Remuneration and Benefits Task Force, which recommended to council an increase to both mayor and council remuneration, that remuneration to be increased each year thereafter by change in CPI, the reimbursement for travel out of the district to be equivalent to that of staff, including per diems, and that travel mileage be updated annually to match the CRA prescribed rates. On January 1st, 2019, remuneration for the mayor increased to $36,000 and councillor remuneration increased to $16,200 or 45% of the mayor's remuneration. Each January 1st thereafter, remuneration for both mayor and council increased by CPI and has every year since. So policy 100.17. So as a result of the 2018 review, council directed staff to develop a policy to reflect the increase and parameters for elected official compensation and subsequently adopted council policy 100.17. This policy clarifies the remuneration and benefits available to each member of council and requires that a review of council remuneration in the last term of each council be undertaken. However, there is a provision that the policy may be waived by a 2/3 vote of council should council choose to waive any requirement of the policy. In 2019, the Union of British Columbia Municipalities released a council and board remuneration guide that presents best practices for local governments to consider when reviewing elected official remuneration. In alignment with Section 2 of the UBCM guide, which was attached to the staff report, and with the District of Summerland policy, council may choose from the following options to complete a review of council remuneration. So for the first option, council may choose to strike a task force and direct staff to draft a terms of reference that would be brought back at the March 14th meeting for council approval, outlining the scope of what the task force will review and make recommendations to council on and the basis of coming up with those recommendations, the number and composition of members, and the staff support that will be provided and other relevant factors. The UBCM guide identifies this option as the preferred option. So with option 2, council may choose to direct staff to conduct a review of council remuneration themselves and bring back a report and recommendations to council for consideration. Staff will select municipalities as comparators for reviewing remuneration and consider the following factors: population, tax revenue, revenue collected through fees, total revenue, total expenses, geographic location, and geographic size. And the UBCM guide identifies this option as the most popular option for reviewing compensation in smaller jurisdictions. The third option available to council is that council may choose to direct staff to hire a qualified compensation consultant that is independent from the district staff and council to conduct the relevant research, examine options, and provide a recommendation of remuneration levels to council. And the final option, Section 10 of Policy 100.17 allows for exceptions to be made of the policy if the exception is made by a majority vote of council or 2/3. So with this option, council, by 2/3 vote, may choose to waive the requirement that council remuneration be reviewed at this time. By choosing this option, council remuneration would not be scheduled to be reviewed until 2026, and increases in remuneration will continue to increase each year based on CPI. And just a short presentation, so with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Questions, Council? Councillor Barkwell.
Just a matter of procedure, Madam Mayor. I wonder about this 2/3 requirement. I mean, how is that really something that we can put in our policy that requires a 2/3 majority to change? I would think that we can change any policy with any majority vote.
So through the mayor to Councillor Barkwell, yes, I would say that's the case. However, this was this very specific requirement put into the policy. So I haven't gone back as far to check that necessarily procedurally. I would have hoped that the CAO and committee at the time of drafting the policy would have looked into that. So I would go by the policy, and the policy very specifically says, yeah, that any requirement may be waived with a 2/3 vote of council. I'm just going to pull it up.
I think what she's saying is it's the policy that we created.
It seems to me we could just have a majority vote and change that policy that no longer requires a 2/3 vote.
I was just going to say, Madam Mayor, yes, what has been done by council can certainly be undone by council at any time. But that is the statement in the policy at this juncture.
Did you want to okay, I'll go to Councillor Carlson then.
Just looking at the UBCM best practices, local government should consider conducting remuneration reviews once per term, and they should consider setting out the timing for subsequent reviews. So it makes sense to me that this would be once per term. I know that in 2018, this got sort of pushed forward and it was actually dealt with because the government changed the way that taxation was done on the on income for this position. And so I think that it's good timing to see if other communities have also gone through that process and if we had all landed in a similar position. So I'd be in favor of moving forward with something.
Councillor Traynor, you have a question?
I don't have a question, but I'll put a motion on the table.
Okay, are there any other questions? Please go ahead, Councillor Traynor.
That staff be directed to move forward with with option 1, which is an independent task force, to review council remuneration as outlined in the report from the corporate officer dated February 28th, 2022.
Seconder? I'll second. Okay, discussion. Councillor Barkwell.
I'm glad it's brought forward every now and then for consideration and discussion, but after considering things, I don't think that the situation has changed much since our last increase, which was only a few years ago, and we've been getting CPI increases and our population hasn't changed that much. There's been no other factors such as a change in the taxation rates of our allowances. No. So I was going to speak against the motion because I didn't think that there was a reason, but as I go through the things in my mind now, I'm kind of in favor because I do have this belief that benefits should be available to elected representatives, and perhaps this review would consider the provision of benefits for elected officials. So I'm going to vote yes.
Just before I go to you and Councillor Van Elfen, are benefits part of the remuneration policy as it is right now? I don't think so. So there's no discussion about that.
There very well could be if council chooses, so it could be a remuneration and benefits review, so to review, yeah.
So right now, remuneration means our stipend, it doesn't include any other benefits, right? That's what I thought. Okay, Councillor Traynor and then Councillor Van Elfen.
So if we were to do this now, whatever results, would it be our council making that decision and then it would come into effect for the next council, like January 1st? Okay, I think that it's a good idea to do it now, and if they find, you know, when the task force looks at what else is going on in communities around the province, if they find that we're in line and that everything looks good, then it can stay the same. And if not, they can bring us back updated information. So I think it is helpful to have this kind of information come forward. And again, we'll be setting it up for the next council. And so I think that that's a good idea as well. And I do like the idea of having the task force just explore the idea of adding benefits as well. Again, that will give us more information in our decision. So I could add that to the motion that I put forward. Or would you like that to be a second one?
It wouldn't be a second motion. It'd be best to do a motion to amend the main motion rather than a friendly amendment. So if you want to just put that the main motion be amended to include, it'll just be to include benefits. Yeah, so the main motion be amended to insert a review of council remuneration and benefits.
Okay, can I do that?
Yeah, and then that would just need to be seconded and then voted on, and then it would be included in the main motion. So then the main motion itself would be that staff be directed to move forward with option 1 to review council remuneration and benefits as outlined in the report from the corporate officer dated February 28th, 2020.
Okay, and again, the task force would bring back options and kind of what's going on around the province. Okay, thank you. So I will put that forward then.
The amendment. Okay, is there a seconder on the amendment? Councillor Van Elfen? Okay. So you had your hand up a minute ago, Councillor Barkwell. Is that to speak to the amendment?
I was just going to make the amendment.
Okay, so that's done. Councillor Holmes, you wanted to speak to the amendment? Or sorry, Councillor Van Elfen. Staring right at you.
No, it's all good. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question through to our corporate officer. In your years and vast experience in your field, is there other communities that you're aware of that have benefits like medical and dental? Because it's definitely been a concern of mine. And why we don't have that, because, you know, as an employee of the district of Summerland, you could be an employee and then change occupations, let's say 2 or 3 years down the road. But in the meantime, while you were there, you had medical and dental. So I don't see how we could, you know, we would be any different, Madam Mayor, that we wouldn't qualify for medical and dental. So like I support Councillor Traynor's motion and to find out what other communities are doing out there. Thank you.
CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. So a key next step would be to come back with the terms of reference. And in this case, the option selected, it's usually the CAO that would pick a group of talented people to evaluate the matter. Just for my own clarity, so we come back just the one time with the draft terms of reference for council. Obviously, the base remuneration is something that is under review. Is it council's direction to also include benefits for the future and to understand what options there are for benefits, or for us to consider what other communities are doing and give advice or options as to the extent of those benefits and maybe the cost sharing associated with those benefits, if those are to be added in the future. I just want to be clear if a decision's being made now to add benefits, or if you're just looking for advice on comparability, what other communities are doing.
That was your intention, right? Advice. Yes. So work of the terms of reference, or the remuneration committee. Councillor Carlson, do you have a question or a comment about the amended resolution?
To do with benefits?
Yes.
Yes, it's just brief. I know that in 2014, it came forward when we first got elected to whether or not people wanted benefits. But in 2018, that never came forward as even as an option, at least not, I never saw anything like that. So I know that there just needs to be some work done on it.
Okay, any further discussion on the amended resolution? I'll call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Councillor Holmes is opposed. And now we're back to the resolution as amended. Further discussion on that? Councillor Holmes.
I think benefits is separate conversation, separate discussion. We could have that separately from the central motion, which I have a problem with. I agree with what Councillor Barkwell said initially before he changed his mind, that nothing's changed. I see no need for us to review this at all. Wasn't that long ago when we did. And I think we staff have a lot on our plates right now to the end of the term. We don't need to throw something else on it. And you know, it's not as if we're winding down. We're ramping up over the next year. So I just can't support this. Thanks.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My thought is along the same lines as Councillor Holmes, except as we move into October, we do have an election this year. And the way I see it is that anybody that wants to look at putting in their papers to come into local government is going to look at the remuneration. And perhaps if we do have, we include the benefits as part of the stipends review, perhaps we're going to get some younger candidates that would like to come forward, or others that, you know, that may be one of the deciding factors for them to come forward, because I'm fortunate. I've got benefits, so it really doesn't affect me. But I could see where it could be a deciding factor for somebody, especially if they wanted to come in for 4 years into this position, that they would actually be looking for a little bit, which I'm talking a little bit meaning some benefits besides the stipend or the remuneration for the position. So, anyways.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patton. Councillor Holmes.
Well, that's why I say benefits is a separate discussion. We could look at just a benefits separately without looking at the stipend and everything else. I don't see why we have to look at the whole thing.
Councillor Traynor.
My question is for the CAO. How much staff time would this take? And this would be done by an independent task force, so members of the community. So what kind of time would it take for you to organize this, and you know, how many times do they meet? Like, from what I recall last time, there was a group of 3 people, and I think they did most of the work. But if you could just remind us of that.
Yeah, thank you for your question, and also for the concern for staff time. The majority of the heavy lifting would be done by the group of 3, and I do imagine 3, although we're not limited to that. However, of course, there is staff time involved because of the selection of those people, having those conversations, the preparation of a report to come back to council with the draft terms of reference, and ultimately with staff time to circle back at the end of that review. So it's not a huge lift, but everything does take staff time, and this would be something that would largely be my time, and to some extent the corporate officer.
Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. To our CAO, would it be possible as we go through this process that that the task force review in two. One would be the remuneration, one would be the benefits. And that way, what could happen is, as it come forward, because it's going to cost the municipality no matter, you know, it's just dollars, how much it's going to cost more. And then that way, it could come to council, and then council could take a look at the remunerations and the benefits and say yay or nay in regards to what is brought forward by the task force.
Through the mayor, yes.
So they would kind of come as the same work being done at one time, but come as separate options? Yes. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Barkle, did you have your hand up? No. Okay, any further discussion on this? I just wanted to say, and Councillor Patton, you said it very well. My intent with the SILGA resolution was exactly for that, to encourage a more diverse group of candidates. It wasn't speaking to the taxpayers taking on that extra load or whatever, but it was definitely along those lines, so that there are options for people that maybe wouldn't traditionally think about this, thinking that this is something that they might want to provide that community service towards. So if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Holmes is opposed. So that carries. We are on 7.6, Building Bylaw number 2022-002, third reading.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm before council today just to ask council to consider rescinding the previous third reading to Building Bylaw number 2022-002 and rereading third reading to this bylaw as amended at today's meeting. There's been a few amendments since the last meeting. If you recall, at the last meeting, we provided 3 readings to the draft new building bylaw, as well as the associated bylaw amendments related to this new building bylaw, including fees and charges, the bylaw notice enforcement amendment bylaw, and the ticket information utilization amendment bylaw at our council's last meeting. As pointed out by one of our councillors, there was an omission from the previous draft with regards to the application requirements for implementation of the BC Energy Step Code. Council did provide first reading as amendment for those amendments to be included. However, upon further discussion with our legal representative, they've also advised us to remove previous provisions we had within the building bylaw with regards to the floodplain regulation of Okanagan Lake, believing that it was circumventing Part 14 of the Local Government Act. So there is a provision in the community charter in the implementation of a building bylaw that it can override the provisions of Part 14 of the LGA. And our legal representative was indicating that perhaps it would be better to omit that language that was referencing the geodetic elevation of the Okanagan Lake and also the regulations subject to that elevation. And rather, instead of that, consider potential changes to our zoning bylaw, which would be a Part 14 matter of the Local Government Act. So based on that legal advice, we further amended the building bylaw and it's proposed in front of you today to remove that requirement for floodplain regulation. So the building bylaw will be silent on that. And we commit to maybe reviewing our floodplain regulation at a later point in time with the zoning bylaw. So that is our recommendation before you today, and happy to take any questions.
Questions, Council? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So if we're taking the floodplain requirement to 34366 out, are you also going to remove it from the appendices that because it's still in the appendices that it's of the floodplain or the high water mark of the lake? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patton. Through your worship, we did look at considering moving that from the appendices. I think it's good information just to inform builders. Some of that climatic data that's included in there is for information purposes only. If a builder or architect is looking for the elevation in terms of wanting to know what it is with regards to requirements under the building code, then it's still provided in our appendix, but we're not referencing anything specifically in the regulation that they have to build to it at any point. So that was our advice.
I have a question, and it's just the way that you worded this a minute ago, and that was we can make a commitment to perhaps look at the zoning bylaw. Are you making that commitment?
Well,
I'm not saying, like in the next few months, I'm just asking generally.
Yeah, I think that is something we do need to consider. I don't know how much of a priority it is for council right at this moment in time, but it's a big discussion. It could have big implications in terms of how we build within floodplain areas, not just Okanagan Lake, but also development close to creeks and tributaries, Enias Creek, Trail Creek as well. I think it would have a much broader community discussion with the community about development within floodplain areas. We have some areas of potential concern that council is already aware of flooding within our community. So Enias Creek is a good example of that. So I think it is a larger project that might be the next council that tackles it.
Yes, and that's why I was suggesting not in the next several months. So thank you, Brad. Councillor Barkle.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can appreciate the comprehensive nature of what Director of Development Services just described on floodplains and such in general, but would it be much simpler and fast and easy to put in zoning for the waterfront or lakeshore properties and the relevant portions of Trail Creek that they have to be built above the previous specified elevation? It would seem really foolish at this time for anybody to be building, not considering that potential flooding of Okanagan Lake, and that doesn't appear to me to require a great deal of discussion.
Through your worship to Councillor Barkwell, I think that, it's a tough one to answer. It's not just the lakefront owners along the lakefront that would be impacted. A lot of Trail Creek is within the floodplain area. I think that our building officials still have the building code to fall back on with regards to any development within those areas right now. So it's not like there's no rules of development within those areas. They have provisions of, like, with regards to groundwater limits and waterproofing of basements already in place under the building code, which they are getting builders to conform to. But the elevation that we're building homes to within those areas, I think, would be a much larger discussion. Again, like, my advice would be perhaps a discussion we'd open with the next council.
Okay. Before you ask another question, could someone bring forward a motion to extend the meeting and give a time, please? Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. 4:30. 4:45.
4:45. You're seconding? Okay, all in favor? Great. Councillor Barkwill, if this is another question about the potential for moving the zoning piece of things, could we set that aside just for a moment? Because it's not really under discussion today, whether or not it's taken out of the existing building bylaw, and then we can talk about that some other time. Okay, thank you. Okay, is there anyone that, well, first of all, any more questions on rescinding and the amended bylaw coming back today? Okay, could I ask somebody to bring forward, can we do this in the same motion, or do they have to be separate, Kendra?
They should be done separately.
Yes, okay. So could I ask someone to bring forward rescinding the third reading? Please, Councillor Van Elfen and Councillor Holmes. Further discussion on this? All in favor? Thank you. And then bring forward the third reading as amended, and then we can have further discussion if necessary. Someone want to bring that forward? Councillor Holmes, seconder. Councillor Van Elfen. Okay, further discussion on third reading of the amended building bylaw. All in favor? And none opposed, so that carries. Thanks, Brett. Now on to 7.7, and that it's the hockey tournament piece, right? And Kendra, you're taking that? Or?
I can, Madam Mayor. So just to follow up with the request from the Minor Hockey Association. So during their presentation today, they requested the waiver of fees for the curling rink dry floor, the banquet room, and the concession, which amounts to, I think, approximately $1,500. And I know Councillor Barkwill indicated he may have questions. So with that, Dave is on the line to help us out. If we do, between the two of us, we can answer any questions you may have.
Okay, Councillor Barkwill.
So we have an existing policy on these sort of requests, don't we? Yeah.
Through your worship to Councillor Barkwill, yes, we do. It's the grant and aid policy effectively is what this would fall under. And as we know, the decisions and budget associated with the grant and aid policy have been made for this cycle. I think the issue that's been described by the sporting group is that the timing was just a bit confusing with COVID and things, and they kind of got good news too late to apply. But even if council were to decide to do something here in terms of the waiving of some fees, we would ultimately have to absorb those because the money's allocated in the grant and aid. And I also just point out in the grant and aid policy, there is a provision that a maximum of $500 can be granted to a local organization hosting events of regional, provincial, national, or international nature. And so again, that's policy. Council can ultimately do what council wants to do in this circumstance, but certainly that would be, if we were to wind the clock back and we were looking at grants and aid in our own evaluation, we would be telling council, they're looking for $1,500 and the policy statement's $5 for some of the things they're looking for these fees to be waived on. But certainly, Dave, is there, if there's more to add to that, Dave?
No, that pretty much sums it up.
Thank you. Councillor Van Elfen and then Councillor Carlson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think our CEO said it very well, except for the fact that, again, they were late coming. They didn't know with COVID if they're going to be allowed to have the tournament or not. The other thing, too, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe our Director of Finance can correct me if I am wrong, I think $500 is for a sports team that is going to a provincials tournament. not hosting a provincial tournament. I think there's a difference there, possibly. I could be wrong, but I'll just wait and listen to other people on council at this point in time and wait for an answer. Thank you.
Dave, are you able to speak to that?
Yes, Madam Mayor. So through the mayor to Councillor Van Alphen, there are two sections in the participation of hosting a regional, national or international championships. One is if a team is going somewhere, so they can apply for a $500 grant in aid. The second one is if a team is hosting, so completely separate from the first. So there are two different streams, if we want to call it that an organization could apply for grant and aid funding.
And there's no dollar amount associated with the second if they're hosting?
Madam Mayor, they're both a maximum of $500.
Oh, they are. Okay. Councillor Carlson.
Thank you. If I recall, we gave money to a couple of different sports organizations with our COVID Safe Restart grant program. I also think that these guys would have probably made the $1,500 in sponsorships and other types of revenue had they known that they were actually going to be able to put this on. So I think it's actually amazing that they're going forward with it and that provincials is happening. I think it's great for these kids who have had a crazy couple of years, haven't been able to play as much hockey likely as they normally would anyways. And so to add extra burden by making it more expensive, I think would be the wrong thing to do. So if we can use some of that COVID Safe Restart money, that would be my suggestion. And alternatively, find another way to do this. But I do think that we should help them out as best we can.
Dave, could you speak to using money from the COVID Restart grant for this?
Madam Mayor, the COVID Restart money, it seems to get kicked around in all sorts of different facets. But I guess council has this cycle provided COVID relief funding to both the Summerland Figure Skating Club as well as the Summerland Curling Club. Those were not, so I guess where I'm struggling with as the finance officer and looking at council's policy is that funding was given outside of the context of the provisions of this grant and aid, so i.e. the maximum of $500. I could envision council, the $500 through the COVID for sure. But again, if council wants to do more than that, is completely your decision to make.
Councillor Traynor.
Does anyone remember what we gave to the skating group and the curling club? Was it 1,000?
That is correct.
To both groups?
1,000 each, yes.
1,000 each. So just thinking about being fair, and given that the hockey group didn't know that they were going to be able to host this event, which I think is a really neat event, what happens if we gave them $1,000 and then we were being fair to all of the groups? That's another option.
Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm going to be a devil's advocate because the next is the swim club's going to call us and they're going to say, hey, I can have a swim tournament, so now I need money. We could have the Brownies come to us and say, hey, we can have a jamboree, I need money. So I think we have a policy at 500, and if our finance officer is willing to look at it and say that the COVID Restart would at $500 would fall within council policy, I think that is fair. I think that it will be a very slippery slope if we start allocating money on an ad hoc basis because people didn't know or that COVID restrictions have started to lift And I think that there is a process, and I think that those that have followed the process, we've dealt with on a very fair and equitable basis. And I think we have to look at this in the same respect. Thank you.
Councillor Barkwell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Patton is very persuasive, but I still view this as exceptional circumstances. And in future years, if I was at this table, I would say we'd go back to the $500 policy and not have any qualms about anybody saying, but you gave $1,000 last time or whatever. It is exceptional, and I could support $1,000 as Councillor Trainer proposed.
Councillor Van Alphen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I support Councillor Trainer's line of thought. I'd like to see us give more, to be honest with you, but I can accept $1,000. What these organizations have gone through in the past couple of years, you know, the arena, the concessions have been closed. It's just been tough times for all sorts of different organizations. I was very fortunate on Saturday night. My wife and I went to a local hockey game, Junior B. The organizers were able to have over 500 fans come to that building because it was free admission. It was sponsored by Tim Hortons. It was sponsored by our local IGA. There's some great people in our community, but these little organizations like Summerland Minor Hockey are going out to the public today with their hand out going, could you please help us and sponsor us through this tournament? And business community is going like, really? Can you please leave me alone? We've been through 2 years of tough times. You know, these people, these organizations need our help. And you know, $1,000, I think, out of our COVID restart funds is reasonable, I think, to watch this organization bring 5 other teams and families, mums and dads, coaches and what have you, into our community from Chetwynd, Smithers, Prince George, and wherever, is a real bonus for us as a community to bring them in. And so if we're going to host this, let's try to do it the best we can. We have a concession that's closed, has been closed all year, because no one can take it on at these rates because you don't know how many people are coming to the arena, you know, with COVID shutdowns and what have you. So I think it's a fair ask, and I'll support it. Thank you.
That word passionate is coming to mind again. Councillor Carlson and then Councillor Holmes.
Oh, you're way more persuasive. Just something to keep in mind is that they're asking for money to use facilities they wouldn't otherwise necessarily need to be using if it wasn't for COVID, and we own the facilities, and so really it's kind of just cutting them a break so that they don't have to pay for the facilities that they would not have to pay for anyways, because they wouldn't be needing them without COVID. And all of the distancing, at least that's my understanding from what was explained to us today, that basically all of these extra things that they're asking for has to do with COVID. They're not asking us to pay for their ice time and their change rooms and all of that. It's just for the extra space that they need in order to keep this safe so that all these kids can keep playing hockey, so that we can keep on hosting tournaments in the facilities that our taxpayers already subsidize heavily. So we might as well use them as best that we can. So that's it.
Councillor Holmes.
Yeah, I mean, on that point, so I don't quite understand why $500 can be used out of the COVID funds, but the other 500, if we go 1,000, why that's an issue. So I've kind of a two-part question: is why can't the full 1,000 come out of COVID funds? And if only half of it can, then where can we find the other 500?
Dave?
Sorry, so the full 1,000 can come out of COVID. I guess my original comment was just trying to tie the 500 to the grant and aid policy and that. So the full 1,000 absolutely could come from the COVID restart grants if that's council's choice.
Do you have a question, or would you like to bring it forward? Thank you.
I'd like to bring forward a motion that we give the Summerland Minor Hockey Group for their provincial tournament $1,000 from our COVID restart funds.
Just to clarify, this is an in-kind donation, right? So we don't actually give them the money, right? Right? Okay. Dave?
So I can't see any heads nodding, or I don't know what anyone said there, Madam Mayor, but even these types of requests where they're asking for in-kind to make things easy on our staff, because we have different facilities that are doing different bookings. We actually do issue them a check, and then they are required to make the necessary payments.
Okay. Thank you. So that is brought forward, and I can't remember, seconder? Thank you. Further discussion? Councillor Patton.
Madam Mayor, I think with the passion of Councillor Van Elpen, I will change my mind.
Councillor Van Elfen.
Thank you, Councillor Patton and Madam Mayor, for noticing my passion. I think it has a lot to do with my nationality. I apologize.
Councillor Barkwell.
Councillor Van Elfen's passion doesn't move me at all, but Councillor Carlson's logic and common sense has.
Okay, I'm calling the question. All in favor? That is approved unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Kendra, for adding that to the agenda and council agreeing to do that. Okay, now I think we're ready to go into closed, right? Oh, no, not yet. 8.1 is the financial plan consideration for adoption. Are there any questions of Dave? Could I have someone bring forward the resolution then for adoption? Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. That financial plan 2022-2026 bylaw number 2022-001 be adopted.
Seconder? Councillor Traynor? Further discussion? Councillor Holmes? Oh, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, that's unanimous as well. And anybody waiting to speak with us? All righty. Resolution to close the meeting to the public, please. Councillor Patton and Councillor Barkwell, all in favor? Great. Thank you, Laurie.